I now call the Snoqualmie City Council meeting to order. All please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Councilmember Snoqualmie, can you please lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's the city clerk please take the roll call.
Councilmember Jeans.
Here.
Councilmember Ross.
Here.
Councilmember Holloway.
Here.
Councilmember Mayhew.
Here.
Councilmember Lissay.
Here.
Councilmember Sundwall.
Here.
Councilmember Shepherd.
Here.
Mayor Larson.
I am here. Council, may I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda for tonight?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve tonight's agenda. Is there any discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. With that, we'll move on to citizens' comments. As I've often stated, the other 13,500 citizens of the city have the right to have their business done in an orderly and efficient manner by their elected representatives, and so we'll be limiting comments tonight to 2 minutes. When you come to the podium, we'll ask that you state your name and address for the record. We often ask for address so that the public can determine what is your interest. Are you a citizen? Are you a lobbyist or a special interest group? Are you a county resident, North Bend resident, and whatnot? Ask that you state your comments in a respectful and courteous manner, and to direct the council as a whole to not single folks out. They're not here to do things for personal benefit, but for the interests of the community. And so please be respectful of that, and avoid comments that are unduly repetitious. And also keep in mind that this isn't some folks from the public might observe that it seems rude that the council isn't responding to the comments or questions that might come from members of the public. It's not a question and answer period. It's purely a time for the council to respectfully listen to the comments of the public, and then and again move on and let other folks comment. All right, so with that, is there anybody else who would like to speak tonight? Monica. And you have 2 minutes.
Monica Lowney, P.O. Box 493. I'm here to talk to you tonight about the Fisher Avenue hawk traffic
I'm sorry,
signal.
Monica, that's 493 Snoqualmie?
Yes, I'm a Snoqualmie resident. And I basically want to talk about how our city signed a developer contract with Quadrant Homes over 10 years ago to install a full traffic signal at Fisher Avenue and Snoqualmie Parkway. They also accepted close to $205,000 to do so. Therefore, I'd like to remind the city they are obligated to follow through with that commitment, even though they've decided not to, based on outdated traffic data from 2.5 years ago. Citizens that live in these neighborhoods are not happy with the current outcome and vote, nor that they were not all allowed to speak. Many felt they were censored. 2 minutes for residents was fine. However, I wanted additional time, and many residents wanted to give their time to me, and all 6 or 7 were told they couldn't speak in exchange for me receiving one set of 2 minutes, which was inappropriate. Yet I'd like to invite the city to join with citizens who are basically raising $2,500 to pay DN Traffic to finish the traffic data that was already accumulated last June, which is recent, to ensure our safety before the hot crosswalk is installed. And I would also like to express that I understand the city is going to be charging citizens labor for making copies for public record requests. And I understand the city needs to cover their cost, and it's fine to charge money per copy, which they've been doing for many years, and many cities do this. However, to charge additional labor costs, to me, is questionable. And as a citizen, I would like to say, if you're going to charge citizens labor costs, then you also need to charge employees who have ethics investigations done for the cost to citizens for that maybe to occur, as well as developers who come and take a year of city staff time to look into a development that never comes to fruition. So please make it equal. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Monica. Is there anybody else who would like to speak at this time? Ann? Non-agenda items? Non-agenda items, yes, please. And again, if you could state your name and address for the record.
Anna Sotelo, 7713 Center Boulevard Southeast. So like I said at the last meeting, I've just been reading history, trying to understand where I might have missed the boat. You know, raising my kids. I've been in business for 12 years, raising my kids, trying to run a business. Maybe I haven't been checking the website like I should have when all this stuff was going on, and kind of blaming myself, to be honest with you, until I started reading this history. After the last CDC meeting, I realized that nobody really has a clue on formulas and what business foot traffic, businesses need as far as foot traffic to survive. You know, I heard everything about the citizens, but I heard nothing about the retailers. The talk continues regarding citizens' surveys and requests and wants, but again, never heard or was asked what business numbers are needed for success. The data that was used was biased and very dated, 2006 and 2007. So then I start thinking, we need a strategic plan. And then I stumbled upon that you guys got one in 3/27/17. It's 1385. And then I was just really disappointed at reading that. Okay, so now I'm surprised to find another survey. This was the National Citizen Survey by the National Research Center in March, and then later again in August, 2 contracts. I just want to hear about a retail survey, and I want you guys to understand what retail numbers there were and what we based our business plans on, being a master plan community, and what numbers really are needed to survive. And just so many documents and minutes that show that Planning Commission recommended and encouraged stakeholders engagement and tried to come up with ideas. They gave you guys ideas and how to do it. Even PJ introduced twice about a website between 2011 and now. So it just leaves me really confused and saddened that I was never considered a stakeholder that you guys refer to all the time in the comprehensive plan.
Anna, thank you. If you
Thank
could
you.
conclude your comments. Thank you. Great. Is there anybody else like to speak at this time? Citizens' comments for items that are not on the agenda? All right. With that, we'll move on to public hearings, presentations, proclamations, and appointments. And I will start by first, on behalf of the council and staff, and I'm sure there are many residents, to extend our heartfelt sympathies to the Wentz family for their loss of their father and brother, uncle, grandfather, and so forth, Ed Wentz, this past week. I had a chance to go to the memorial this past Saturday, and it seemed that a few people it's more appropriate to honor with a proclamation than Edward Wentz. Russ, thanks for coming to accept this. I assume you're here to accept this on behalf of the family tonight? Yeah. All right, thank you.
Judy.
And Judy too, thank you, yeah. So the only thing I'm going to change here is this is a little more formal. It says Edward Wentz. We all knew him as Ed, so if you don't mind, I'm just going to say Ed Wentz. Whereas Ed Wentz and his wife Cleo moved to Snoqualmie in 1952, and whereas Edward served with the Snoqualmie Fire Department for 37 years, rising through the ranks to the position of assistant chief. And whereas Ed installed and maintained fire department callback siren that can be heard through the upper Snoqualmie Valley each day at noon. And it was a beautiful memorial service as it concluded, and the casket was coming out of the church this past week. That's when the alarm went off, and it was a beautiful ceremony. Whereas Ed maintained a radio system for all emergency services in the region to include establishing radio towers and repeater on Rattlesnake Ridge. Whereas Ed was elected to City Council position number 5 for a 4-year term from January 1st, 1974 through December 31st, 1977. And whereas Ed and his late wife Cleo were Grand Marshals of the Snoqualmie Railroad Days Parade in 2000, and Ed was honored again in 2017. Ed was one of those that dropped the prize-filled ping pong balls from a helicopter at the end of the Snoqualmie Parade every year. And whereas Ed work ethic, his dedication to the community, sense of humor, and commitment to service shaped the Snoqualmie Fire Department, where his legacy lives on. And whereas Ed departed this earth on February 24, 2018, it is fitting that a special time be set aside to honor and recognize the contributions and the memory of Ed, who gave so generously to our community. Now, therefore, I, Matthew R. Larson, Mayor of the City of Snoqualmie, Washington, on behalf of the citizens of Snoqualmie, City Council, and City staff, do hereby recognize and proclaim Monday, March 12, 2018, Edward Wentz Day in the City of Snoqualmie, Washington, dated this 12th day of March 2018. And it's appropriate to applaud.
I brought some of these. I'm going to leave them up here. Some of our handouts from.
Can I get a picture?
Some of the handouts from the service. It tells us back in the back, and so I'll leave those over there for everybody. And
We could just kind of duck under our tables or something.
Go ahead, Judy. Finish what you're saying.
so anyway, after one of the best things my dad ever did was 37 years as a volunteer fireman. He volunteered at all kinds of other things all the time, and all of us kids learned volunteerism. And then I taught my kids volunteerism, and they're teaching their kids volunteerism. It's one of the most important things about my dad. He gave up himself all the time. Want to say something?
I just very thankful for the morals and the principles that taught us. He was the one that felt or did things based on what others said he should do. He just knew what was right. And it was, I did a lot of work with Chuck. He was very much that generation.
And at the same time, he was funnier than dirt.
Always had good sense of humor, right to the end.
Very, very much so.
Thick and thin.
Thank you very much for this.
Thank you.
Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Well, I'll just add, there's few memorials or services you go to where there was such deep, heartfelt emotion in the room. And not only for heartfelt sadness, but there was also a joy. The church was packed for all those people coming out to honor your dad, Russ. And I think it's joy for it. It's rare that someone leads a life like your dad that was just fully lived and pretty much scandal-free and just committed to the love of family and community. And so it's really a sense of celebrating that I thought was really a great honor to your family.
Well, I'd hoped we didn't, there's so much going on, but hoped that he had picked up a wonderful habit from his mother to keep a diary. And through his high school years in Brooklyn High School, he kept a diary, and we read it in recent years. It's just fascinating. He would put in a full day of school, then he would have football practice. He was active in many things, sports. He worked for his dad's his furnace business. He had a mechanical furnace business out of Kirkland, NC. He worked for him and installing furnaces. He sold them, and in high school. Then after that, he'd go out with friends, and just a full day. It was like every day. That's how he lived life every day.
Yeah.
Rode his bike back and forth from Kirkland to Issaquah on the
Oh, wow.
West Mamish Road. Yeah.
Yeah.
To get there at 3:30 in the morning in the dark.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Work at Edmund Jack's Issaquah Dairy.
Yeah.
But when he had his business, he would get up and run his shop and everything, but still go out in the field. He had guys working, and he'd be from early morning to night all the time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. On behalf, again, the city council, and everybody, thanks for your dad's service and what he gave to this community. So, have a good night. Thanks for coming tonight. Okay. With that, John, you get to follow that. John Wilson, our King County Tax Assessor. John, we're just, thank you for taking the time to come out and speak with us tonight. So,
If I can grab the clicker. Just like the one I got at home. Well, thank you all for having me out tonight. I wish I would have some news for you that would make you smile and that, but I'm afraid I'm going to talk to you about property taxes. I feel a little bit like the modern day Paul Revere running around the county yelling, the taxes are coming, the taxes are coming. But let's look a little at what's going on in the real estate market and what's ahead for us. The area compares a lot.
He needs to speak in the microphone, or he needs to use one of them.
it might not be turned on. We'll see.
There we go. All right, the good news is we're not San Francisco and we're not Vancouver.
Yes.
But our real estate, while our weather today was kind of like this, there's some troubling economic clouds on the horizon. If you take a look at the median price of a house in the Bay Area, San Francisco is 1.5 million. In Vancouver, it's 838,000. In King County, it's now 597,000.
That's Seattle or King County?
That's Seattle. In King County, it's actually a little higher because of the east side, and we'll show you some other county numbers. You can see the average home in King County is 658,000, went up $1,000 between 60 and $100,000. And what the assessor's job is we try to set values on 700,000 parcels, commercial, residential, big, small, all kinds of things. And we ask, how big is your property? We want to know, what's the kitchen like? What's the bathroom like? And we use those to base how much we think that property is worth. And yes, property taxes have gone up in the past 5 years, roughly 30% countywide. And if we look, here's why. Inadequate funding of public ed has meant that the state Supreme Court said the legislature had to do something to increase that, and that was generally going to be through the property tax. A 1% cap has forced local governments in many cases to move to levies to fund basic services. We'll show you an example of how that kind of has run extreme, especially in the city of Seattle. And then we have the situation where we have voter-approved levies, such as Sound Transit, the emergency radio network that's now being put in place. All of those add up.
Or John, I want to just add a caveat for our residents and taxpayers that we are not in the Sound Transit.
No, you're just outside of it. And one of the things we did, by the way, when we were calculating the property taxes, we were very careful to make sure if you were outside it, you didn't get to vote, but you also didn't get taxed. That was not necessarily the case in Snoqualmie County. We also have seen rebounding house values. To whatever extent values dipped a bit here in Snoqualmie, they're back up to the pre-recessionary levels and above. But you can see, like, this is the city of Seattle and all the things that are on its property tax bill, from schools to low-income housing, family levies, parks, pre-K, you name it. And what the city of Seattle has done that you guys haven't, and I think it's to your credit, is the city of Seattle has increasingly moved general fund things into levy
This isn't going to
funding
be recorded
categories.
for him, right?
Now, 2 years ago, in the 2016
I just seen YouTube.
2017 session, the legislature passed what's called a levy swap. The idea here was they were going to fill the gap for public education by backing out local school levies and then filling them in with a property tax, a second property tax. And this year it hit. And here, let's go over some numbers so we can show you, we'll see if this works. Okay, there we go. And you'll pardon me, I've got a bit of a cold that I'm battling back from. But Seattle was right about at the county-wide average of 16.9% and an average increase of about $825. Here's you guys, 16.7, a little over $1,000 on a median value home of about $573,000. Now, Redmond was $700,000 home, 19.5%. About $1,100. Next, come on, don't fool me now. There we go, Bellevue. Bellevue was over 20%, $1,200. And then you had Mercer Island, which was 18%, and that was almost $1,600. And then if you were in Carnation, any of you have friends in Carnation, you want to direct them to where they can get cardiac relief service, because in Carnation, that's the number. And that's the increase
Oh, that's weird.
on a median home value of $379. And we'll talk in a minute about why that's the case in Carnation and why it didn't happen in some other places like here and elsewhere. But what it means is that overall, over these last 6 years, countywide, property taxes have gone up anywhere from 50 to 66%. Now, where does that money go? Well, in this King County, we have 139 governments, including the 39 cities. You guys are one of those. We have sewer, fire, water park. We even have a cemetery district on Vashon Island. Washington State has more than 2,000 governments, including roughly 1,700 special districts. If you look at where does the money come from, the state gets the bulk of its money from the sales tax. It's a very different picture, though, for King County, where the bulk of our money for the county comes from the property tax. This past year, we hit county-wide total assessed value that topped $534 billion. Billion with a B. That's the highest it's ever been. And we put new construction on the books of well over $10 billion, which again was also a record amount. But what that has meant is, in the meantime, there are other problems. Low-income seniors aren't exempted from special levy lid lifts. Property taxes are finite. They are capped by the Constitution, and frankly, we can't rely on necessarily voter approval. We have increasingly been using special levies to pay for basic services. and what happens when voters say no. And in fact, about 20 years ago in this county, voters did say no to funding Medic One and actually voted against funding a world-class first responder system. We had to get it back on the ballot within 90 days so that we could continue operation of it. And what you're seeing is the 1% cap is causing small counties in King County to cut services. You might have seen in the news last week, I believe it was, or the week before, that the prosecutor has decided that on a number of minor criminal offenses, felony offenses, burglaries, car prowls and that they're going to stop prosecuting because they can't afford to anymore. And finally, finally, higher property taxes lead to greater affordability problems. And then we have the impact that's coming with the federal government. There are new limitations on deductions related to your home. The total mortgage loans are now capped at $750,000, which could even include some houses probably here in Snoqualmie. You've got a state and local cap now of $10,000. Now that's for your property taxes, sales tax, and other local taxes. And that'll include the tax you pay if you buy a new car or that. It's really easy these days to pop over that $10,000 cap. And then for first-time home buyers, it becomes less and less attractive to them to become homeowners, and I think there's a challenge with that. And if you're an older homeowner, it may be time to downsize, but the challenge there is, can I afford to? Where do I go? And finally, what does it mean for home ownership and real estate? That's one of the things we're going to have to see over the next couple of years. The federal government still hasn't got sorted out what all the impacts are from the federal tax bill that was passed at the end of last year. And it means we've got to have a discussion, and I'd like you to start to think about what you think and how you can participate in a discussion on how we can fix our tax system, because it isn't working anymore. It's breaking down literally before our eyes. Now, we've met with the Evans School and the Foley Institute from WSU, the former governors and lawmakers, to talk about how we could do this. And we will be back to you later this year. I've been working with County Executive Dow Constantine to start a statewide discussion on how do we modernize our tax system in a way that provides some property tax relief, perhaps lowers the sales tax, but funds vital local services. And on that note, I'm going to say thank you and say if anybody wants any quick questions, I'd be happy to answer any.
Councilmember
Sorry,
Sewell.
you're back. Brian didn't do that. So 2 questions. One might be a yes or no question, and the other may be a little bit more lengthy. So first question would be, you danced around, you managed to get through those last 2 slides without saying the word income tax. It's the only tax I can think of we don't have in Washington that could be implemented to help provide relief. Is that a fair statement?
There are other tax ways you could look at too, though.
Okay. Second thing on the assessment, by the way, you must be a really popular guy this time of year.
I'm loved by all around the county. It was hard to get here wearing the plain brown paper bag, though, with the eye holes in it as I drive around the county.
So my question is you went into, I didn't realize there was a level of detail into the assessment of a property, and I've lived in Washington for 15 or 16 years, and no one's ever come to look at my kitchen or what kind of siding I have. I mean, maybe they did a drive-by, but I'm just, there's got to be a mathematic formula that you use because you can't possibly visit all 700,000 properties
Not
that you
each year,
mentioned.
but we visit 1/6 of the houses and properties every year. We're required to under state law. Now, does that mean we necessarily get inside the house? No, not necessarily. Do we also, though, use what's called a computer-assisted mass appraisal system. So we base it upon sales in a particular neighborhood. But we only use those sales that are for like homes in like areas, so we don't match up, say, a home value here in Snoqualmie with a house in Burien or a house in northwest Seattle. We pick other houses in this area and see what the sales numbers have driven. What we've seen, though, over the last couple of years is those numbers are getting increasingly driven by bid sales, where their houses are put on the market and there are multiple bids. We had, for example, we live in the Seattle Roosevelt neighborhood. We had a house kitty corner from us that in 16 went on the market for $760. It sold in 3 days for $900,000. We have other counties, though, in the state of Washington where the average price home is only $140,000. So that real estate frenzy is starting to drive property taxes upward too. And with the new formula that the legislature used to fund education, that now ties a formula directly to your assessed value. So the higher your assessed value, the more you're going to pay. And roughly half of your property taxes go for K-12 education.
Any other questions, Council? Councilmember Shepherd?
Can you explain a little more about the house incarnation, how they increased 30%, but their total increase was small? Can you kind of talk through that formula?
Sure. Part of it was that, frankly, Carnation doesn't have a very robust commercial sector as far as retail or other industrial. So most of it's based upon home value. And Carnation was what we call a physical inspection area last year. When we go into a physical inspection area, that's where we usually do a true up of the land value and drill down to make sure we've got land values right. It tends to mean that the land values go up because our land values lag a little bit by market. And so theirs was sort of the combination of not having much commercial real estate and also having their land values go up.
John, is there some good news here for next year in terms of some relief that may be coming? Particularly as the expectation is some school districts are going to start making adjustments to local levies. I mean, there's that timing issue. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, two things that are at play. Hopefully some of the levies will start to roll off from the school districts. Also, the legislature voted in the closing days of the session last week to lower part of the McCleary thing by about 0.3 cents per thousand. That should bring it down a little bit. It's going to depend, though, also what's on the ballot between now and November. You know, we had, pardon me, in February of the 18 school districts in King County, or rather the 20 school districts in King County, we had 18 of them on the ballot. And as you saw this year, some of the ballot measures went down, some of them passed. Almost all of them that did pass did not pass by the majority that they were used to getting. So there's great concern in the school community about what's going to happen to education funding over the next couple of years.
And do the figures you show for Snoqualmie, so ours did pass in February, does the increase reflect that added on to that passage?
No, because that will come next year, but it'll depend on to what extent, if there were any roll-offs or exchanges. In some cases, I can't remember exactly. Is yours the Riverside?
Snoqualmie Valley School District.
Okay. Some of the school districts, what it is they put measures on because they had levies coming off and they wanted to make sure they had bridge funding until the state funding fully caught up over the next 3 years. So you'll have to see what we get next year.
Okay. Councilmember Sunwell?
Yeah, that's what we did. In fact, I think the levy that we replaced it with is actually slightly lower than the outgoing one. But obviously, with McCleary, the bump is significant. You had mentioned, follow up to my original question on the income tax. Other than income tax, can you at just a very high and quick level maybe articulate some of the ideas that are out there other than implementing an income tax to address our what some call regressive tax system?
One would be a homestead exemption. Another could be a graduated form of the property tax. You could look at some shifting to other revenue sources. There are a variety of things. But, you know, part of it, frankly, is we're not trying to come with a predetermined notion of it's got to be this. Let's see what works. And inherent in that is trying to get a better understanding. I was just back in Washington, D.C. last week at the National Association of Counties, trying to get a better handle on what the impacts of the federal tax legislation is going to be on counties. And frankly, it's a struggle because there was a story this weekend in the newspaper that back in Washington, D.C., they don't even fully understand some of the contradictions and unintended consequences of the federal tax bill that they rushed to pass at the end of the year. So once that gets sorted out, maybe we'll have a better handle of what might work and what makes sense as a pathway forward.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Shepherd.
So, coming from California, we had something called Prop 13.
Lucky you.
So we've never considered that in this state, right?
You probably couldn't do it in this state because of the uniformity clause. The state constitution has a requirement that all property be taxed uniformly, and in California you don't have that, and that's why you have wild disparities of people that are paying $300 a year in property taxes, next door to a house that's paying, you know, $5,000 in property taxes. And I respectfully argue that the impacts from Proposition 13 in California were devastating to their higher ed system and to a lot of the basic public services. And it's taken them decades to kind of claw their way back and reach some kind of stability.
Any other council members have any questions at this time? Okay.
Well, I want to thank you all for having me. I really enjoyed coming out here, and we'll be back. Hopefully next year we'll tell you we're taking 20% off everybody. Although don't hold me to that. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule. All right. With that, I'd like to ask for the council's confirmation of the reappointments of Sarah Wiesel, Carol Peterson, and Ann Loughlin. I mangled those names, didn't I? Did I get it? Okay. To the Human Services Committee for a one-year term. May I have a motion and a second, Council?
I'm so moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to confirm the names as stated. Any discussion, Council?
Thank you for your service.
Right.
Yeah, get them on before they change their mind.
Any member of the public, or including you guys, would like to comment to this item prior to action? Carol, go ahead.
If anybody in the audience doesn't know, I'm sure the council all knows, the Human Services Committee, the council budget is now setting aside 1.2%. And that equaled about $170,000 for 2018. So we had the honor last fall, as a brand new person on the committee, of recommending allocations of that amount of money to many, many different organizations that had asked for it. And we are in the process now with, of course, Eric's help and Debbie's of putting together a strategy and goals for doing this committee's work, because it's growing all the time as the city grows. And I know that the council recommended we do that, and it's lots more meetings for us, but that's okay because I think it's really needed too. And I thank you for your support in this. I'm hoping to learn a lot. I have a very large background in philanthropy. I used to be the director of a $150 million foundation that the Piggott family owns. And so I really wanted to get in on this because I didn't want my 10, 12 years of background to go to waste. So thanks so much, Mayor. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Carol. Anybody else? Anna? Or Anna, I'm sorry, if you have to come to the...
Comment regarding the presentation. There was no area for citizen comment. No.
Typically, we don't. I mean, it's not an action item, yeah. All right. Council, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Again, thank you to all three of you. So, appreciate your service. All right, with that, we move on to the consent agenda. All items listed below will be enacted by one motion. Action items include minutes for the February 12, 2018 special joint training and the regular city council meeting, and the February 26, 2018 regular city council meeting. And also includes approval of warrants as stated in the agenda packet. May I have a motion, council?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as stated. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion from the council, is there any member of the public that would like to comment on any of these items prior to action? Seeing no one move forward, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. With that, we will move on to reports. Under Parks and Public Works Committee report. Parks and Public Works Committee?
That would be me.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I knew you were just contemplating for a while, so that's fine.
Yeah, we don't think we have anything. Yeah, we don't have anything.
Okay.
We're just as an update, I guess, because that has been sort of a hot topic. So we've pushed back on the vehicle purchase some more on Dan and his team to come back, sharpen the pencil, and get us some very, very explicit detail on specific uses and types of vehicles. So I would expect that to come forward again on Monday, and then we'll go from there. Hopefully that'll be something we can provide for council to look at the second meeting of this month.
All right. Thank you. Community Development Committee report.
Our council and the tribal council would like to ultimately have a meeting together. It would be a publicly noted meeting. It'll probably be in May or June earliest. And there is a desire on the part of, I think, our council as well as their council to get to know each other a little bit better. And I'm hoping to schedule a couple of meetings where we'll have 3 of our council members meeting pretty much over coffee with 4 or 5 of their council members. And in the course of 2 meetings, we will have all of us at that meeting, and it'll give them a chance to, get to know each other a little bit better. So I'm waiting for available dates from the tribal council as to when we could do that. And the idea is to accommodate people who are in offices in downtown Seattle and maybe make it late in the day. And so once I get those dates, I will share them with you, and we'll see when we can get together and start working together in an economic way, something that will be good for the city and the tribe. So stay tuned.
All right, thank you, Bob. Finance Administration Committee, Agenda Bill 18041, Comprehensive Classification and Compensation Study of All Management and Professional Positions.
At the December 11th Snoqualmie City Council meeting, the City Council requested a comparable salary and benefit survey be conducted for all management professional positions. 4 different firms have submitted proposals to accomplish the objective, including Ralph Anderson Associates, Cabot Dow Associates, HR Answers, and Arthur J. Gallagher and Company. Examples of the general themes that the contractor will review include establishing a compensation philosophy, developing a comprehensive compensation plan for all management and professional employees, and developing specific recommendations regarding employee classifications and salaries. Move to approve the use of Ralph Anderson Associates to provide a comprehensive classification and compensation study of all management and professional positions. Thank you.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve Agenda Bill 18041 as stated by Councilmember Holloway. Any discussion, council? And I also want to preface this by saying we're still struggling with how to figure out how to do a 3-touch rule. We're aware that this is the first touch for some of the council members tonight, so I think part of that process that's most efficient is to treat some, particularly since we were afforded a fairly light agenda tonight, was to, I don't want some council members that are seeing this for the first time to feel rushed into this. It's not time sensitive. We could postpone it if necessary for a couple more weeks, but see this like an ordinance where it's introduced at one meeting and then brought back at a second one. However, if the council's gone through this, even those seeing it for the first time are comfortable that this pretty much encapsulates what's been discussed in the past and what was asked to be brought forward, then it certainly could be ready for action tonight. So just wanted to make sure and preface any discussion with that. Councilmember Sunwell.
So in looking at the scoring matrix, it looks like this is how we handle, for example, it's just whoever gets the best score, right? Is that how we choose this?
Eric, you want to come up
With the caveat.
or Deborah?
Because that's who won.
Yes, that is who won. We did use the scoring to inform a recommendation, but this wasn't a process like maybe for a public works contract. We chose to do this scoring. We didn't have to, so we don't have to go with the top score, but it's just to help inform our recommendation. It did turn out that the highest scored was our consensus recommendation.
Well, and there was a 1% difference between the top two.
Councilmember Holloway.
There was a 1% difference between the top 2 candidates, and we did discuss that in FAA.
Councilmember Holloway, can you pull the
sorry.
microphone close? I think some folks are having a hard time here.
He's new at this.
Having fun down there, aren't you? There was a 1% difference in the evaluations between the submitters on this. We did have a discussion of really what was the difference between those two, and based on feedback from staff, we're comfortable that the appropriate choice in content was selected.
Councilmember Ross?
I see that you have the list of references. Did you get a chance to call the references?
I did, yes. I was able to reach out to 5 references with Ralph Anderson and Associates, 4 references with HR Answers, and I was able to reach 1 reference with Cabot Dow Associates. The 4th, Gallagher, with the price being more than double 2 of the previous and a lot more than the lowest, we didn't reach out to them.
Thank you.
Councilman Mayhew?
All right. I have.
We're doing round robin. Yeah.
All right. A couple concerns, and not so much with who the administration is recommending be chosen for this project, but a little bit in the scope of work within the project. So, first off, there's a part of the proposal that refers to, it's under task 10 on page 9, data presentation. Well, the task 10 is compile and format compensation data. It says data presentation will be customized to fit the city's objectives as specified in the RFP. So the RFP was not provided to us, so I don't really know what that refers to. So that's a concern I have. The task 8 on page 8, it kind of caught my attention. The category is called discuss and document compensation policy. And as I think back to when the City Council asked for this study to be done, my understanding is that council members had questions about what the compensation policy should be. So we were being asked to approve a raise for, I think, for a group of employees, non-union employees. And there was discussion about, you know, what's happening, how comparable are benefits and how comparable is salary to other cities and possibly to, or I guess I understood at the time, also business employers, non-governmental employers. And so my sense was that there was this compensation policy discussion that the council itself wanted to get into. Maybe I understood that wrong. And so I was just concerned that the way this is written, it says that they propose the consulting team meet with key management staff to clarify and confirm the city's compensation policy. By the way, to my knowledge, there isn't a city compensation policy. Maybe I'm wrong. And again, that perhaps leads to discussion. So I'm just wondering if this task maybe needs to be reworked just a bit with the vendor to clarify how they will work with the council in sort of addressing this compensation policy. And then there was one other, which is sort of a similar idea. Task 14, page 10, develop implementation strategy options and compute implementation costs. So there's a lot of talk about a strategy. There's sort of an implicit bias towards increases, which may or may not turn out to be the case, I guess. I think certainly some council members were questioning whether some positions might turn out to be adequately compensated. So I just think maybe there's a little rework that could happen here in the proposal with, and I don't mind working with this vendor. I think the criteria, I don't have any concerns with the criteria that was applied, but I'm just worried that the scope of work isn't quite right, particularly with how the council would be involved. I don't know if my fellow council members have those concerns as well or not.
On the last item, I would just say quickly that Councilmember Jeans and Holloway have been through this before. We've never entered into it sort of with a bias that was going to be increases across the board. In fact, we've had instances where we did these comparables. We felt some positions were actually overcompensated, and we just put a freeze on them for 2 or 3 years until that kind of got readjusted. So it's gone both directions.
Yeah. Just to be clear, my sense was that was a bias perhaps in the proposing organization. I didn't necessarily sense that came from administration.
I'll kick it back. You've got at least three, if not 4 or 5 items there. I'll kick it back to Eric or Deborah to go through those and then just ask for clarification whatever you can remember, and then.
Sure, completely. You know, task 14, develop implementation strategy options and compute implementation. So that would be, you know, in the text it's written, and it doesn't really include the city council. So looking at ways to either have a recommendation to council or get them involved in the process. So, you know, I would imagine that when we could do it 2 ways. One is I could go back now, really with all these tasks, all these changes, and you know, work on refining these to be in line with what the council's looking for beforehand, or we could proceed and, before we sign the contract, we could work with Ralph Anderson and Associates to make sure it's what the council wants. But in each case, I would imagine, especially in talking with the references, that Ralph Anderson and Associates would be willing to work with us. But I can go through each too if you'd like.
So Mayor, I'm not really sure what the way we might like to handle this. It occurs to me that there's two possibilities. One is if other council members have the same concerns that I do, one possibility is I'd be willing to advance a motion that we ask the administration to go back, consider these items and perhaps come back with a revised proposal. But alternately, if my fellow council members are relatively happy with this, we could approve this subject to asking for a few changes. So, maybe the other council members could kind of give a sense of what they want.
Well, I think you, Councilmember Shipper, I'll come to you right away, and then Councilmember Holloway. It would be cleanest for me, because I want to make sure the other council members understand each one of your points. If you could take one point, have Eric or Deborah address that. If you feel you want to make a motion, then we'll see if there's a majority of the council says, yeah, let's take a look at that. We can either try to address it here. As suspected, I'm doubtful that this might be leading to a vote tonight, but it would be more of giving direction going back to the committee. Councilmember Holloway, you're shaking your head.
So I'm concerned that we're changing scope of the contract. And to keep it clean, we probably need to incorporate those changes, go back to Ralph Anderson, get concurrence on those changes, make sure that the price quote remains the same, and then bring it back. Just to keep it clean, because again, you've changed the scope of the contract of what we're asking.
Yeah, I don't disagree. There's enough. I didn't see a lot of people being concerned. They're chomping at the bit to get this done tonight.
This is not.
But I hear enough items coming up that it's going to get real messy if we have 15 amendments and then try to do an approval tonight. So
Peggy.
So let me do this. I want to give some of the council members a chance to speak, and then we'll come back to some of Councilmember Mayhew's concerns and tick through those. And I suspect some of you may add some. Councilmember Shepherd?
So I want to make sure that we include the incentive pay that we have for our staff.
The incentive pay?
The incentive
The PFP program, you mean? The pay for performance?
That's considered one of the benefits, so it will be included.
Okay, and the retirement, whatever they would get for retirement.
All benefits, yeah.
Deferred comp, regular retirement, that will all be
Okay.
included.
All right.
Anything that looks or walks like a benefit is a benefit will be considered.
Yes.
Councilmember Lissay?
Yeah, I'm just referring to the previous comment about changing the contract. Without a copy of the RFP, it's kind of hard to know what the contract would include anyway, to be able to comment on that. So I don't know where to start my question and answer from a standpoint of not knowing what the original question was of the consultants.
Okay, well, that's consistent with, as I recall, one of the first items that Councilmember Mayhew brought up. So can you address that one right off the bat?
Sure.
The request for
If
proposal?
Eric wants to add to this, then he can. I don't mean to take his thunder. So he's been working on this, helping us with this very diligently. So Eric can provide that to council tomorrow via email, the scope of work for this RFP. And second part was?
That was the one part.
Okay, all right.
For me.
And also he can provide the references. He's still typing those up late this afternoon, but he can provide those to you also tomorrow.
Okay, so at least it answers the initial question, which is the RFP is not available for you to review tonight. So again, one reason why you probably wouldn't be inclined to vote on it tonight. Councilmember Ross and then Councilmember Holloway.
I'm sure it's probably in the RFP, but how many positions does it impact?
19.
19?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And we started out with the 19 that we currently have, but now that the events coordinator position has been approved, we are going to talk to them about adding one more, which would be that one.
Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Holloway.
So I waited. So considering this is probably going to come around again next council, I request that the RFP be attached as an attachment to the agenda bill for clean record.
That one's an easy one. I think it's a given that will be in the complete package prior to a vote. Right. So Councilmember Mayhew, if we could come back to you, and if you could, I think your RFP was the first item, if you could just hit on the second one, just that one. and we'll discuss that one.
Right, the second is what's referred to in their proposal on page 8 as Task 8, discuss and document compensation policy. And in particular, I was concerned that in their proposal, they didn't discuss involving the council in the discussion of compensation policy. They only talked about meeting with key management staff, and so I thought perhaps some level of involvement by the council is what I understood the council to be looking for originally.
Can you speak to that?
Well, I know whoops.
Or
I
what,
know-
can you speak to, first of all, what do you understand to be current policy, if one written one exists?
Well, the only one that I can think of at this moment is years ago, there was a resolution, I believe, that refers to when the M&P classification schedule was redone, and it refers to that. That's probably the only compensation policy that I can think of right now. The other part of that is that key management staff, I believe that we can talk to them about having a council liaison or a few council members.
Whether that's a member of the F&A committee perhaps, or
Right. But I know that later, somewhere in the document, it does state that they will be coming out to give a report and I believe a presentation to the mayor, city administrator, the key staff, and the council. So,
where the council's always been involved in the past, of course, is in executive session when it gets into the details of what's being recommended in terms of compensation. Or I think it came out of a staff retreat. Councilmember Jeans and Holloway may recall that the policy from the council was kind of in the vaguest terms, shoot for just north of average, because we wanted to be in a very competitive position to attract and retain some of the better talent in the world of municipal governance, and as a priority and goal. But I don't know if you two can recall much specificity or direction given to the staff from the administration, from the council beyond that.
No, it was about it. I mean, it was to remain competitive and also for retention. You can, if you're south of average, you can end up being the training ground for other municipalities, and that just, it's an investment to get somebody up to speed.
So, Mayor, on this point, I don't know if I have the sense of the other council members correctly or not as to whether many of the council members want to be involved in this setting of policy, or whether the council would be happy with just one liaison or not. I think that'd be an important question to know the answer to before, so that if you're going to renegotiate this, that you're doing something that council will be, satisfied with.
Okay. Do you, to sort of set the course of the conversation, do you have an idea or a recommendation yourself to suggest to kick the conversation off?
It was my impression, my recollection of the discussion at council was that the council wanted to be involved in that discussion as a council.
Understood. Specifically how? I mean, do you have an idea or a suggestion?
I don't.
Oh, okay.
The resultant policy should probably be council policy.
Understood. I'm just wondering if it's taken back to F&A committee, preparing it for a couple weeks from now. F&A committee doesn't have any more direction than the administration does in terms of how are we supposed to get there to satisfy the majority of the council. That's why I think it's worth spending some time, and we fortunately have the convenience of some time tonight. Councilmember Sunwell?
I guess I would suggest trying to have 7 people. That's a lot of cooks in the kitchen when trying to come up with the initial recommended policy. Obviously, we all need to buy off on the recommendation. My proposal would be, and I don't care whether I'm a part of it or not, would be that we have a group of 3 that will work closely to come up with what they feel like would be the best. And then around that proposal, we can pick it apart rather than, at least we have some raw ingredients put together, right? And we may change some things or recommendations, but I'd rather than trying to create from nothing something with 7 of us, I would recommend that we select 3, I don't really care who, that would form that initial recommendation, and then we can talk about it from there.
Eric, on the current or Jim, on the current language, it seems to suggest that the consultant we're hiring is going to assist with that process, or so it's kind of which comes first, the chicken or the egg. Whether it's 3 people or 1 liaison or whatever, perhaps it's not something that has to be resolved in terms of specific policy beforehand. It's understanding that the consultant is going to work with somehow involve the council in that policy making or that recommendation. Is that what you're understanding?
My thought would be that this company has a lot of experience working with governments all over, including in Washington, and I think it might be worth asking them their thoughts on, perhaps based on their past experience, how they've worked effectively with councils that want to be involved in setting policy. And, you know, to the extent that they don't have a specific answer, or they think it's flexible, I think I personally completely agree with Councilmember Sundwall's proposal that we nominate a group of 3 of us to do that interface.
Eric and I were just discussing something similar, and if you'd like, we can ask someone at Ralph Anderson for their recommendation based on their past experience.
In other words, a recommendation to how to involve council
Yes.
in creating that policy, which gives you a little more time as the process moves forward for them to.
But I do think it should be in this task 8 time frame of their project, as opposed to at the reporting stage, when I think, you know, the soup's already cooked, right?
So, just for the sake of time, and so we'll get into another 45 minutes of exploring 15 different ways liaisons, or 3 or 4 or 1 or whatever, would the majority of council be comfortable with the idea that what would go back to F&A, in other words, between now and the committee meeting, when this comes back to F&A, Eric will reach out to the consultant and say, hey, can you give some recommendations as to how we would involve council? And then at the committee, that would be discussed, and then the 3 members of the F&A committee would make recommendations on a tweak to that language and bring it back to the full council. Does that sound like a good way to do it, Jim?
It certainly does to me.
Yep.
Okay. I'm getting mostly nods of head. Does anyone object to that approach? Okay. Does that make perfect sense to you, Eric?
Yes.
All right. So we'll move on then. So if the rest of the council is comfortable, can we just queue up the next item that Councilmember Mayhew had?
I'm fine with that.
Unless anyone else wants to weigh in on anything else. All right. Councilmember Mayhew.
All right. So the other item was the right one here. Yeah, task 14 on page 10, which is develop implementation strategy options and compute implementation costs. I think that it was my sense that council members either thought that was going to be their role, or certainly seemed to be wanting to be involved in that particular determination. What is an implementation strategy and so forth. So I think compute implementation costs is probably something we'd be looking to the contractor to do. But so my sense, I guess, to put to the rest of the council is that something that council members want to be involved in, and if so, perhaps a similar discussion with the contractor or the proposer could be had as to how they might involve council in that, if that's what we want to be involved with.
I don't know if either one of you want to speak to that before Councilmember Sundwall will get back to you, right back to you.
That's fine. We
I
can,
mean, maybe speak to how that's been approached in the past. And
well, how it's been approached in the past is, I believe when we had Cabot Dow do the last survey, there was 1 or more positions that were found to be in the higher range, and so they were frozen at that level. And so we can just make sure that the way that they worded it, I think is a little bit unfortunate, because it did make it sound like it was going to, you know, it could be an automatic increase. And I know we understand that that is not necessarily true.
yeah, I guess I'm maybe not entirely understanding it, because the way I understand it would work is they're going to come back with their recommendations. They're going to do all the comparable metrics and say, here's how we think all these positions line up. And we're absolutely going to be bringing back to the council for their review and affirmation of that, or affirmation or denial of that, or suggested input and tweaks.
Perhaps I could just clarify. My understanding originally was that questions were being raised about not just salaries, but benefits.
Right.
And so I think it's a somewhat complex equation to solve if, so there may be conclusions as to salaries, there may be conclusions as to different benefits. Particularly the question that was raised, one question I remember being raised at council was benefits as compared to the private sector and how the private sector has been moving in. Please don't, I'm not saying what my particular opinion is. I just believe that was part of the discussion that was had at council, and that therefore it might be a fairly complex thing to sort of think through how that, from a policy perspective, how council might want to solve that. And that might not be as simple as asking sort of for recommendation from a consultant.
Yeah, we've always approached it, if I'm understanding your concern correctly, from a holistic standpoint. In other words, where it's always trying to compare apples to apples as much as possible. So if, compensation's higher over here, but the benefit packages are lower, or compensation's higher, but or compensation is lower, but benefits are higher. I mean, you're trying to juxtapose those and not lose track of the full compensation picture. Councilmember Sunwell? Yeah,
I think what Jim is saying, and I think if he is saying this, I agree with him on it, is that the complexity of it is I think you have in these silos, potentially you have, here's kind of what average salaries are, here's what average benefits are, and so on, when in reality, though, there's what levers are at what stage in various cities are gonna vary dramatically, probably, right? One city might have, they don't pay anything for health insurance, but their pay is low, and others might have high pay, but they, have 50% copay or whatever, right? So as long as the presentation allows us to at least have some feedback into how we would want those levers to work in our city, great. I'm not the guy to do that. I'm barely the guy to probably listen and have thoughts on it. But I do, that one of my comments is here, we see in our area, for example, Microsoft, where, when I was there 15 years ago, my youngest daughter was free, paid $0, right? That's not how it works there anymore. So I want to make sure that we are, in a sense, at least looking at the commercial aspect of things to make sure we are lining up, because they are competitors, right? I think people serve on cities perhaps for different intrinsic reasons that maybe supersede some of those numbers and dollars, but we still have to be looking at it. And so I just want to make sure that we don't have this too rich of a package in one area and too deficient in the other.
That is what I meant.
Councilmember Shipp.
Okay, see, we agree.
Okay. So when we do salary surveys, are we looking at cities primarily that are the same size as ours?
Typically, what we look at is cities within what we call the 50% range of our assessed valuation and population. So it can go 50% above and 50% below.
So 50, as far as total property values for the city?
Yes.
Or
Okay.
population.
Both.
Yeah.
Because generally, if you have more population, or let's see, if you have a lot of reports going to a director, then they're going to be earning more.
Typically, yes.
Yeah, so that's going to be a real challenge if you have somebody who's got a lot of people reporting to them, comparing that to someone who doesn't have any reports. So.
And that's precisely why we're relying on an expert in this field to help us mull through all that. I want to make sure we wrapped up the issue, that second issue that you raised, Councilmember Mayhew, too, and that is, or Deborah, I guess I would just add, I've never seen where we ever approached this thing in the past where, again, that holistic approach, not the siloed approach, was absolutely how we've, by policy or philosophically, approached these, whether it's union contract negotiations or M&P salaries. So if it would give, so Jim, what I'm saying is my administration completely agrees in terms of our past practices to what the point you're raising. If the language in that contract's deficient, I guess we can just simply take that back. You've heard that concern, I assume,
Yes.
Both you, and give some thought to, and if Jim, you have some suggestions as a tweak in the language in that contract that would satisfy that's being addressed, then
Yeah,
we can
well,
take,
that's
address
right.
it at F&A committee.
In this case, this task, they, they don't outline how they would, it's written as if they will do this on their own without any interaction, and I'm suggesting that it needs to have some interaction with council.
You don't want them to just say, this is what the plan is, and this is how you're going to implement it.
Right.
Or some sort of policy emphasis or a prioritization on, hey, we want strong benefit packages, but weak compensation, or vice versa. You
Yeah, so
want
they might
council to
come
be-
forward and just say, here's our recommendation. I think the council would feel like I believe the council would have liked to be involved in that.
Yeah, you want to know how council weighs into setting some of that policy or emphasis.
That's right.
Okay. I want to come back to Councilmember Shepherd for 1 second before I go to you, Councilmember Sunwall, and just confirm. Councilmember Shepherd, the issue you raised, did you have a question or any suggestion for tweaks, or were you satisfied with the?
Oh, I just know that, you know, I've looked at MOUs for 11 bargaining units, and there's so many aspects of 50-page documents. So it's like you're not going to get that in a quick conversation. There's just so much to consider, and usually it would be a negotiation for management for a whole year. So this whole process is really foreign to me, and I'm just trying to catch up.
Yeah, so in my experience has been usually those questions are answered when you see the results of what the consultant's bringing back, and they address all those questions. Usually council's pretty satisfied because there is such complexity in all the things you're talking about. Councilmember Sunwell?
So I've been sent information. It looks like on September 12th of 2005 was the last time this particular issue was addressed, AB 05-194. Our former good mayor, Mayor Fletcher, issued an executive order that this, basically the same conversation we're having now, would be handled by FNA, which was going to be my recommendation anyway, is that FNA would be the three people, actually, the three people that would kind of be the initial front line for this. It's what we've done in the past. That's not always a good reason to do things, but this sort of does, it's kind of financial and administrative, so FNA seems reasonable. So that would be what I would recommend. And I don't know if we need a nod of heads or a shake of heads or whatever to move forward. I mean, I feel like maybe we've reached a point that there's no more to discuss on this, and if we can get home before 10 o'clock, that would be a first.
Yeah.
No.
I think you guys should.
Oh, that's right. You were gone. We got home before 10 o'clock.
Got
That's
one
right.
before 10.
Not saying there's any
Credit.
reason for that.
I'm challenged to try and beat Brian's record. I'm sorry, Councilmember Sunwell, you didn't make a motion there, did you, or did you?
I moved, but I didn't make a motion.
Okay. All right. What you just said, I assumed everybody was operating from that it was going to go back. This is sort of a first touch.
I just wanted to make it clear that in my initial conversation, I wasn't suggesting we draw draw straws for who those three would be. I was just going back to look in history, how we did this 13 years ago. Seems like a good way to do it again.
Yeah. The catch-22 often in these conversations is the FNA committee doesn't quite know what to recommend to the full council without having a sense of what the full council wants to direct, and vice versa. So I think this is going to be helpful to the FNA members to have heard this conversation. It'll give a little more direction and clarity to their conversation. So, Councilmember Lassay, you had a.
I'll defer to other discussion. I was just going to encourage Councilmember Sunwell to make a motion to actually make an actual motion to. Or if you want me to make the motion, I can do that too.
Well, I think everybody's already concurred that this is going back to FNA to tweak these issues we're discussing.
we have to, though.
I don't
If you
think
want to
there's
make a motion to that effect, you
There's
can.
not a motion required. This is an FNA agenda bill.
Right.
So it goes back to.
It's going
FNA.
back to the working committee to do some work on it.
But was there not a motion and a second?
There was a motion, a second to approve it, so we have to make a motion
To not approve it.
refer it back to committee.
They just need to withdraw their motion.
Okay.
No, we moved to use them,
What do we call it?
so we need to vote on that.
Or we could, I think, make a motion, return it to committee to further consider the items discussed
Scopes and
tonight
services and everything.
before, and have it come back to us at a future council meeting.
All right. Before you do that, I thought there was at least one more item you had that you wanted to discuss before. Were you ready to send it back?
I'm ready.
All right. All right, so if anybody would like to make the motion to send it back?
So, Mr. Mayor, you wanted to say one more thing?
Or Peggy, if you could just state that in the microphone, please.
I move to send it back to committee without selecting the Ralph Anderson until we get some feedback from some of the questions that we have.
Second.
Okay, motion a sec.
Aye. Sorry, that was premature.
Motion to amend the main motion on the floor.
No, I think it's a motion just to send it back to committee. So a point of order, I'll ask the city attorney to weigh in on how to clean this up right now. Do you want to?
Right, the motion on the floor was to approve selection of Anderson. The maker of that motion and seconder could withdraw it, or Councilmember Shepherd could move to amend that by, stating as she did, that it's not a selection, but a referral back to committee and exploration of these points on the contract.
Either way, you're not making the appointment. So if you just withdraw it back to committee for a couple weeks, it has the same effect. So
Yeah.
I made motion,
way it's
I
clean.
will withdraw motion.
I withdraw my second.
Okay.
Back to
That's on
committee.
the original?
Yes.
I didn't hear if there was a second on your motion. Councilmember Shepherd, are you okay with that, just going back and having, just withdraw
effect.
this and send it back to committee?
I move to send it back to committee.
And I second it to send it back committee. It's the procedure is correct. It's a subsidiary motion. I got my chart out.
All right, go for it.
I've been working this out. So it is a higher ranked motion, therefore it supersedes the original motion and second, so it can go back to committee. It doesn't have to be withdrawn. None of that has
All
to
right.
happen, so.
I'm
practicing.
Resident parliamentarian. Wow.
I'm practicing.
All right, so I assume there's no further discussion. All those in favor of the motion? Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Jeans.
So it's going back to where it ought to go back. It's the 3 council members who ought to consider it, but under the new format that we have, other council members can attend that meeting, just who want to weigh in on it at the committee level before it comes back to us.
If the chair lets them speak there. So.
However,
They can do so.
However, if I recall
Sunwell?
our conversation last time, that was a 1-week invitation until we had time, which is on the agenda later today. So assuming we, do the whole federal thing where we have this like quick fix Band-Aid until we actually get to discuss it in long term, that was a 1-week reprieve that we need to finish talking about later tonight. It's on the agenda somewhere.
Okay.
I think we're done.
All right, any further discussion, council, on this motion? No. All right, this is a motion to send back to committee. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. I'm going to have Jody reach out to Ann McFarland tomorrow and see if she wants to reach out and give some brownie points to Councilmember Lissay for doing his homework. That's a good job. I'm impressed, Matt. All right.
Get a little dinosaur.
Yeah, she'll give you a little dinosaur or something like that.
I like dinosaurs.
All right.
No further report from FNA.
All right, thank you. Sorry, 1 second, my computer went to sleep during that conversation. Public Safety Committee report.
I do have one. So in February, when we awarded the Public Works contract for the Fisher Hawk Signal, there were some questions of the Public Safety Committee, and I wanted to go over those. You asked about enhanced patrol on the Parkway, infraction for running a Hawk signal, and also what signage can Public Safety come up with, and then work with Public Works. Okay, so regarding enhanced patrol on the Parkway, so just a little background. Last year, there were 2,004 traffic stops made in Snoqualmie, and of those, there were 463 tickets issued. Oh, can you hear me? Okay.
Dan's a little hard of hearing.
Sorry. According to Captain Almquist, he stated that police have been heavily patrolling the Parkway over the last 3 weeks, and so in February, there was a report attached to our agenda. In February, they had 300 stops as compared to 100 this time last year. And so they've increased the patrol, they've issued numerous tickets, and they've been parking alongside the Parkway to show more of a presence in the area. And they also have deployed the portable speed radar sign. So as you're going down the hill, you'll see it'll be flashing your speed. I noticed it's not there tonight because it takes 48 hours to charge. So you might see it again maybe tomorrow. Regarding fractions for running a Hawk signal, if it's the same as running a traffic signal. You'd be issued a ticket for failure to observe traffic signal and a fine of $147. And then signage in the Parkway, our police department's going to come up with signage ideas and then bring it back to Public Safety and then then we will submit it to Public Works Department and work with them. Are there any questions?
Can I add one?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
She's our
Councilmember Shepherd.
fellow public safety
Go ahead.
member.
So I remember Chief Phipps had mentioned that it would be better if we had a light that was on continuously instead of having it go dark.
I did mention that if it was dark, meaning no light on the light itself, that may confuse drivers, whereas if it's green at all times except for when it's being utilized for crossing, then it's probably more, it's better for the citizens while they're driving down the road to know what to do, because I would think that it would be, it's just like when electricity goes out and the lights all go dark, it's a four-way stop. So if there's somebody that's unfamiliar with that area, they may stop if it's just dark.
Thank you.
So and I appreciate the creative and responsive conversation at the Public Safety Committee, but also just the caveat is noting that, you know, we have to, Public Works is the one that primarily drives traffic control devices complying with the municipal uniform traffic control device standards, and so that's Police Chief, I a lot of respect and applaud you and welcome those creative ideas. But you know, all those ideas have to be vetted out with the Public Works Department too, to make sure we're compliant with.
Uh-oh, you're under arrest, Mayor.
Yeah. All right, Dan, you better come up too.
I feel like we're in Black Diamond.
We are aware that we were going to have to go through Dan
Yeah.
for all this. It was up for a discussion, and I think it was a good discussion to have.
Yeah.
But we obviously knew that it wasn't our side of the shop, if you will.
Yeah, thanks, Chief.
Thanks,
Thanks for the clarification. Yeah, I was at the meeting. I enjoy a good creative conversation, but I don't want to get expectations out in the public up too high. You know, these things have to be thoroughly vetted out, and as Bob was saying, some of this stuff we legally can't do. So, Councilmember Shepherd.
So I'm looking at the report from the Public Safety, and I'm looking at traffic stops, and it says February 2017 versus 2018. And it looks like, you know, we've got 300 traffic stops in 2018 versus 100 in 2017 for February. So we're triple the number of stops. And I think 50% of those stops are on the Parkway. Is that about right? 50%?
Chief, I'm sorry if you could come up to the microphone. It's good exercise.
I feel like I was up here all night the last time. I did not want to come up here this time. Take so much abuse from my peers, you know. I would say at least 50% are on the Parkway. We do spend most of our time doing emphasis on the Parkway. In fact, we have 5 special details in the next 2 weeks, specifically on the Parkway itself.
And so can you tell us what you told us at the safety meeting about the school zone and how many tickets you were giving out and how you couldn't keep up with all the people that deserve to be ticketed?
Well, what I talked about was the perception is that there's not enough enforcement there, and I would tell you that on occasion I have been out with the crossing guard to see for myself how bad it was, and I actually had a driver stop and say that people were speeding, and little did they know that below us was a car stop where an officer was given a citation, and above us there was an officer on a car stop given a citation. And those were the 2 officers we had assigned in Snoqualmie at this time. So we were pretty busy doing all we could at that time.
Then you still had people whizzing by, right?
Well, yeah, that's why he stopped and said, aren't you going to do anything about, you know, the traffic
Okay.
and the speeding and so forth?
Okay, thanks.
Wait, Chief.
Councilmember Holloway.
Is the increase in numbers due to more disregard for the law or increased enforcement?
No, I think it's just visibility and increased enforcement.
Thank you.
And I can't talk about when I wasn't here, but it's been a point of emphasis since I've been here.
And of course, the Timber Ridge School wasn't there, you know, a little over a year ago.
I just don't want anybody saying the Parkway is 300% more dangerous than it was.
Oh, no.
That's not the case in point.
No.
We have an emphasis going on. So let's get the facts right before we get into the conversations.
Councilmember Mayhew.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Chief Phipps. I recall that the council asked the police department to increase patrols along the parkway, I believe a couple meetings ago. I believe at the same meeting where there was a Fisher Hawklight discussion. And so I'm just following up on Councilmember Holloway's question. So there was some discussion about the school zone.
Yes.
Which I think we all drive through there and witness the speeding there. So I congratulate you and encourage you to continue enforcement there. But did you not also increase enforcement down in the Fisher Street area on the parkway as well?
Absolutely. In fact, that's where we usually put our radar trailers in that area.
Great.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
That radar trailer is a joint asset between us and other cities, correct?
No, it's ours.
It's ours now?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, just
Councilmember
follow on. So
Mayhew?
just to be clear, so that, and I think this is Councilmember Holloway's point as well, is the increased tickets and stops are a result of, including in the Fisher Street areas, is a result of increased enforcement, not necessarily, we don't know whether that's increased infractions actually occurring. Is that right?
That's true.
Councilmember Sunwell.
So I've always been curious, do the little speed thingies that you have, the little cart, does that record average speeds?
No, it does not. No.
Is that not possible? Because it seems to me that would be very interesting data to have that would be the only true way to know how speeds are trending, I guess.
Well, it's not only that, but it also tells us if what you're doing, what type of enforcement is effective or not. And because there was an immediacy of trying to get the enforcement aspect of it, we didn't take the time to get those speeds without any enforcement. So we have a baseline to take to look at once after we've done enforcement to see if we were impactful, if there was a decrease in speeds. So we did not do that aspect. We went right into the enforcement side of it. And that doesn't help any when the trailer itself doesn't have the capability to record those speeds.
All right.
Thank you.
Councilmember Ross, thank you for the report. All right, moving on to the Committee of the Whole, we have Agenda Bill 18040, ordinance amending Chapter 2.36 of the Snoqualmie Municipal Code related to salaries, establishing a salary commission and providing for severability and effective date. This is, it's an ordinance, so it's actually for introduction tonight. And possible action on the April 9th. So is there, for Bob, if you could, or who's gonna, any one of you could take up reading this into the record, just the summary statement, not the motion.
So summary statement, RCW 35.21.015 authorizes the city to establish an independent salary commission by ordinance with authority to set the salary of elected officials. The city council desires to amend the Snoqualmie City Municipal Code, Chapter 2.36, and establish a salary commission to set the salary of the mayor and members of the city council. This is for introduction tonight only?
Correct. It's an ordinance, yeah.
I'm done.
All right. So any discussion, council, at this time? Councilmember Mayhew?
So I have a few questions. It appears that, so I thought this was just to establish a salary commission, but it looks like we are also eliminating the eligibility of the mayor and council members to participate in city health insurance plans.
No.
That clause doesn't seem to be in the proposal here.
It was in the version that we provided to the committee. I've not looked at this, but unless
Latest
the
version.
wrong.
Can we have it brought up?
It should still be remaining.
Yeah, can we bring up the exhibit ordinance amending? First one, top of the list.
Ordinance amending 2.36 salaries.
Right there.
Attorney Sturbank, it does look to me like this is the old one for what it's worth.
It does. That is not the version that came out of committee.
Same thing, I couldn't tell.
So that's,
This entire version
so do we
has been
want to
revamped.
withdraw, so that, I think we want to withdraw this.
Yeah, but I don't think we're,
No, I think we need, well, this is for introduction, we can make an amendment to this. If we want to proceed forward next council member meeting, we can make an amendment to get the correct ordinance in there.
We don't have to make an amendment. This is just correcting an error.
Well, at this stage, it's part of the public record, so if my opinion is I have to make a motion and amendment to change that. Right, wrong, or indifferent?
Enough to do a striker amendment, Mayor, if that's
Yeah,
the
okay.
council's pleasure.
You want to suggest some language, what it's being replaced with? What do you want to call it? The
Well,
real, we're going to replace the
We
fake
can do
one?
it
We'll do that next
We
week.
can do it next
Or, I mean,
council,
at
we're
the next
talking
meeting.
F&A in a week.
Oh, okay, you want to correct it, okay, I see what you're saying.
The issue of the health care is addressed in current 2.36.
Sorry, Councilman Stonewall, Councilman Lasay had his hand up before you did.
Oh, I was just impersonating him.
Yeah.
Not well.
I don't know, he's doing a pretty good job. I'll let you ask that one, because I think I saw that too. But on the comparisons, the only thing I would add to the comparisons, which would be useful, is when the last adjustment was made. There have been a number of cities that are listed here, and the other ones that have salary commissions that have enacted salary revisions in the last couple years, and some that haven't done it for 20 years. And it'd be good to have, if you're going to compare, and we're going to be consistent, it'd be nice to know what year the last adjustments were done.
As an additional column, you mean?
As an additional column in that case,
Okay.
yeah.
Eric, are you running with this one too, or? Who's got this one, Deborah?
I do,
Jody
and
has it.
and Bob.
Councilmember Stonewall?
So I would add to that, I would love to see, since we're adding columns, we have to go landscape here.
Actually, I'm so sorry, Councilmember Stonewall. But
I'm sure you are.
I'm remiss. I need to, just as a protocol, make sure that when, 7 cooks or individuals aren't sort of directing, if I can have concurrence from at least a majority of the council to add the information. Again, this is a prioritization issue that, throughout the week or during a council meeting or throughout the week, I can't have an individual member saying, hey, add this or do that. It needs to be respectful of the entire council, that the majority of the council at least concurs with that. So again, my apologies. I just want to back up for a moment back to Councilmember Lasay's request and ask, even by a quick show of hands, we don't need to belabor this too much. Is that something that the rest of the council or majority of the council?
Can we restate before I put my hand somewhere?
Yeah, so Councilmember Lasay, could you restate your request for what you wanted to have added as information?
Sure. Under the attachment for the comparisons, I would like to, at the pleasure of the council, include then a column within that chart that identifies the years in which the last salary surveys were done, so that we can have a comparison. If we're comparing salaries, we need to know the timeliness of them as well.
Or not necessarily a survey, but the last time they actually.
Last time they did an adjustment.
The recency of the compensation.
By city.
Okay.
Yeah, so it could have
It's
just
one
the city's
city.
name in another column that says, 2005, 2010.
No, it's just the year effective. So their compensation is
Yeah,
what?
that would be
Yeah.
fine.
Parentheses, year effective.
Effective year of the adjustment.
So just by a quick show of hands, everybody concur with that?
Yeah.
All right. Councilmember Stonewall?
So while we're adding to stuff, I would also like to see, if the council agrees, the most recent previous salary. So what was it before this?
Okay.
That's just in my quick research, that was super easy to find. It's probably the same exact place where they went to get this information and the year associated with that. So what did it move up from? What year was that? And then what year was the new thing? And that I think will allow us to.
Okay, so perhaps something that could be embedded in the same column that Councilmember Lasay is asking for, with a year and a percentage increase or something to that
Sure.
effect. Okay. Again, show of hands, if everybody feels that that's compelling or interesting information to have, everybody worthwhile. Okay, I see at least 4 or 5 hands. Councilmember Shepherd?
So are we going to include cities that don't pay council members?
I'll toss that to Jody or Bob Sturbank, I guess. I mean, I'm not aware of any that don't.
Yeah,
What was the question?
Are there some? Okay, yeah.
What did you
Yeah,
say,
if they meet the comps to the comparables, then I don't see why they wouldn't be included.
I just don't want to have us, based on some of the criteria, assume that we're going to exclude somebody that that hasn't done this within a certain time frame of reviewing, or maybe they've never had a salary commission. I think that we should be comparing ourselves to just councils in general, whether they've chosen to do a salary commission or not.
Okay, I just want to make sure that everybody understands your question, Councilmember Shepherd. Are you saying comparing to cities that have or do not have salary commissions, or those that do not do any compensation, period, like zero compensation?
I think that we should not exclude anybody based on any criteria. I think we should basically use the cities that are comparable in size.
Right, so I guess I heard something a little different, or I heard two different things, and I'm just trying to clarify. So I thought at first you were asking, are we going to be sure in the comps in the comparable cities of comparing salary and compensation to include those that don't do any compensation or have zero compensation?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that is your question, or that's your request?
That's my request.
Okay. Everybody okay with that one?
I'm not sure, because I need a clarifying question first.
Okay, Councilmember Small, if you could.
So I'd like to know what cities of our size, since we're trying to keep it close to our size, don't have them. And second of all, I believe it's the job of the Citizen Advisory Board to make those judgments as to whether or not what cities they're going to include and what research they're going to do. My understanding from our last conversation is we authorize a citizen group to do this, and then they go off and analyze whatever data they want, and then we live with whatever decision they come to. So us prescribing what cities they look at or don't look at seems to be potentially outside the scope of what their job is. So that's mostly a question for Mr. Sturbank.
Well, now that you put it in that way, it sounds like, I mean, I get what you're saying. In other words, it sounds to me like you're saying that's not germane to this particular motion.
I don't know that it's ours to determine. That's what I'm saying. Not that it's not germane. It's sort of germane. But our job, my understanding, is that we will either agree to appoint or agree to not appoint a citizen council that will then go off and do their research and come back with their, not recommendation, but their word, their decision as to what will happen.
They make the recommendations on the methodology.
Whether they include Black Diamond or Pacific is not a council decision, is my understanding. Is that your understanding, Bob?
Right, yeah.
So if that's not the case, I don't know that we need to spend time tonight talking about which cities should be in, zero salary cities, $11,863 cities, because that's not our purview to do that. We actually have to be hands-off.
Sure. That's the point. Point well taken.
Okay.
Now, if in our analysis of whether we want, I vote yes or no to authorize this committee, I want to take into account more cities than are listed, I can certainly do that, and that can impact my decision of whether or not to appoint a citizen committee, but
right.
It stops there as far as I can tell.
And thank you, I appreciate the points, but I guess I would ask you then to clarify, Councilmember Shepherd, was your question not along the same lines as Councilmember Lassay and others, whether it was percentage increases or when were increases, to make that determination as to whether you want to support doing the salary commission? You're trying to look, at least because we're showing charts already in that packet that you're seeing, those comparables. I assume you're only asking for those purposes, just to see. I mean, you see comparables showing cities with compensation of different council members. You're just asking, are we making sure to include the cities that don't have any compensation?
Well, I think you can you can construct this to kind of slant it one way or another. And I just want to be sure that if we're going to do this, we're going to take what's current now as far as what the compensation is, regardless of how they came to the decision to be at that level. And basically work from that. And I think that sometimes you can, if you select certain cities that are, higher paid, then you're going to get higher salaries. But
so I'm trying to help you get a question to your peers here to see if you can get four to concur. So there's two different ways you can ask the question. You can ask the question where you're saying, this is what I want to see in the back end of this thing in terms of determining appropriate compensation. Or you can say, I need to make a determination whether I support even forming a salary commission. And if I have information that comes back that says 50% or 60% of the cities out there don't even do compensation, then you might conclude, I'm not interested, let's not do a salary commission. So I guess what I'm trying to clarify is your question about how you want a compensation study structured in the back end or on the front end, trying to make a decision about whether to even support a salary commission. You want that information to help inform that decision. That's what Councilmember Sunwell, I think, is trying to clarify as well. Which of those is it?
I guess before they start, I think we should identify what cities should be used as comparables.
No, that's the commission needs to decide that.
So
Councilmember Holloway? Councilmember Holloway and then Councilmember Lissay.
by standing up a salary commission, we delegate all logic and decision on salaries to that salary commission. Okay, so it's up to them of which cities, under what criteria, what third-degree polynomial formula they use to making this decision. It is up to them. That's kind of the whole purpose of the salary commission is you have taken that decision out of the hands of the elected officials, which they should have done in Bell, California, many, many years ago. But you're taking a hand out of the elected officials and you're putting it into this salary commission as a separate entity.
Giving it to a citizen commission.
Yeah.
Councilmember Lissay?
Yeah, I just want to, having a chance to review now the updated chapter 2.36, it clearly is just adding the provisions for appointing a salary commission and establishing that role of the salary commission, and it's clear that it is not the purview nor is in the hands of the council to choose the criteria, choose the conditions, choose or make recommendations. It is solely in the salary commission's duties to do that, and so we don't want to be in the middle of saying what should or shouldn't be in there. It's up to the salary commission.
Right.
Councilmember Shepherd?
So does that mean we don't include the additional columns that you were suggesting?
I think it's, at this point, it's up to the salary commission to decide that.
Okay.
That's my
Well,
comment.
I'm going to go to Councilmember Ross and then Mayhew.
Well, that was my comment. I had the same question.
Right. So that's what I'm trying to clarify, whether it's information you need to make this decision or information for making that distinction between what goes into the commission's work. Councilmember Mayhew?
Yeah, I don't feel like I need any more information of that nature to make this decision. I do think that's for the scope, that's for the commission, if we establish it to determine on their own. But I don't understand what this is, and I hope it's not, I hope I'm not seeing an ordinance put on a screen and asked to somehow evaluate that in the middle of a council meeting when I've never seen it before. I hope that's not what's happening here.
No, they're going to get a third touch. This is just first.
Go ahead.
Well, this is the ordinance that is an attachment to the agenda bill.
But what we saw at FNA was different, and I did
But
point
what we
that
saw
out
in
today.
FNA was different, and that was the issue before. This is what is attached now.
I did just email council the version that I had provided to the clerk prior to the FNA meeting so that everyone has that version. I emailed it to you. I don't know that's been put up on the screen.
What were you
So
referring to?
that will be a revision in the agenda
so-
packet that goes for your second touch at the next
Oh,
FNA
okay.
meeting.
So this will change.
Okay, I apologize. So I was confused by what Councilmember Lissay was referring to, but he is referring to something that just came out, and I can't evaluate that, an ordinance that I see for the first time in the middle of a meeting where I'm trying to listen to my fellow council members.
No one's evaluating for.
It shouldn't have
an
gone
action.
to you during this meeting.
Okay.
Sorry, I got it.
Councilmember Sumwell?
So I'll actually backtrack. I actually believe what we've received, most of this stuff actually has perhaps no bearing on the decision. That document of comparisons actually doesn't really matter because that's not data that we're going to come up with. We have to decide whether or not we think, especially in the context of the conversation we spent an hour talking about today, about proper compensation for staff, whether or not we want to be uniform across the board when we look at compensation for hired staff or electeds in general. And if you either think that's a good idea, and the citizens can go back and say, you morons shouldn't get 500, it should be 250. Okay, fine, whatever, right? But the point is if we're doing this for the other 19 positions that we've talked about that are city staff, we just need to decide individually whether or not we think that same thing should be done for the 8 electeds. To me, it's as simple as that.
So it sounds like you're pulling back your request for the percentages or the increases on those years.
It doesn't change a thing.
All right.
It's cool
Well,
information.
We're happy to reduce staff work, so if you want to pull that back, that's fine. Councilmember Lissay?
Yeah, I just want to, we're in committee of the whole. So committee of the whole committee is it being introduced this tonight? None of us have seen it. Maybe FNA has, but we've seen it only through the agenda packet. It clearly is, we're stepping beyond what we should be stepping to. It's been introduced to us. We've asked for clarification on the ordinance. From that point, I don't think we need to discuss it anymore.
Councilmember Lissay, it sounds like you're saying you don't have a need for the information you requested then either, or?
It's up to the Salary Commission.
Okay, so you're okay to take that?
I'm pulling back and saying, it's been introduced to us. There's action scheduled for the future. We've provided some comment, but I think it really revolves is whether or not the content and actions and implementation of any changes in any way or status quo is up to the Salary Commission. It's not up to us to influence that.
Okay, so just, and again, I want a concurrence of the majority of council just from a quick show of hands or any objections. Because I'd be happy to take this additional work off of Jody's plate if we just basically bring it back as is for further discussion at the FNA, knowing that we have to correct, obviously, some of the information that was presented in error tonight. My apologies again, Councilmember Mayhew. I didn't know that was being shifted around to cause confusion, so I appreciate the clarification anyway, so.
Yeah, I just got confused. I don't need any more information other than the correct version of the ordinance to look at.
Right.
That's all I need.
And just so, Mayor, if I may, so that council, you'll see this when you read the corrected ordinance, but the reason for the revised version is that the very first draft was assembled using, in large part, the City of North Bend's ordinance, and repealing the existing City of Snoqualmie code provisions related to council salaries. The problem with doing that, of course, is if you repeal the existing code provisions now before a salary commission has taken any action, you've just wiped out any legal authority to pay yourselves during the interim work. So that, along with the benefits, I assumed was not council's intent and wanted to make sure that you had a draft that did not do that. And then there were some other minor changes that were made relating to clarifying whether it is or isn't a standing commission, that whether it takes action just once every a certain interval. I believe it's 3 years. So I removed some inconsistencies in that language in the North Bend Code. And I think that'll all be pretty clear because I've done it in underscore strikeout when you read the corrected version, but I just wanted to give that explanation.
Okay, so just for me to quickly summarize, I'm hearing concurrence to pull back the request for additional information for both Councilmembers Lissay and Councilmember Sunwell, and to be mindful and respectful of Councilmember Shepherd's request, I want to see if there's a show of a majority of hands that want to pursue that information as well. Okay, so I'm not seeing a show of hands, so again, that information won't.
Can you restate what that was?
Cities was 0.
It was a request that in the charts of some cities and compensation that we made sure to include. I'm sorry?
I changed my.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Shepherd. Any other questions or comments or discussion on this item at this time, Council? Okay. So again, that will be possibly ready for action on April 9th. So with that, we'll move on to other items in Committee of the Whole, or discussion items, and one was a Human Services update that I'll ask Councilmember Mayhew to quickly give.
Yeah, I just want to share with my fellow council members that the Human Services Committee has met several times in recent weeks. They are working on our request from this City Council. We made a request of them when we approved the last Human Services budget, that they return to the Council prior to the end of the first quarter of 2018 with a strategic plan and process for needs assessment and weighted criteria of allocation of funds. So they've begun work on that, and I will tell you they're, as the Council liaison, they've been very effective and very diligent, and they're very committed to this. I will tell you that the end of the first quarter is coming up pretty quickly, And they're talking about meeting twice a week, trying to get through all of this work. And I think that it would be fantastic if we might be willing to give them another 45 days. I think you'll be very pleased. I don't want to steal their thunder, but I think you'll be very pleased with how they've engaged with what we've asked them to do. If we could just give them a little bit more time, I think that'd be a little more respectful of their time, and let them come with a fully formed proposal and ideas to us. So I would like to make a motion that we give them another 45 days or extend the request that we've made of them to not come back to us for an additional 45 days to report on what we've asked them to do.
Second.
Is this passed at the end of March plus 45 days or
Correct.
from now?
45 days from the end of March, right?
Okay, 45 days from the end of March, all right. I have a motion and a second. I don't know that
Second.
needs a lot of discussion. Any discussion?
You can have.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. All right. Ethics Advisory Report, as council is well aware, the ethics hearing examiner came up with his conclusions regarding that he determined there was clearly a conflict of interest or an ethics violation. He also concluded that there was no damage done to the city or citizens of Snoqualmie financially or otherwise, but also recommended that I enforce some disciplinary action, which, as you saw, that I did take a disciplinary action that was provided to you on Friday. So at this point, I consider the matter closed and time to move forward. As far as the operational and audit internal controls issue, we're making good progress on that. We had a very productive meeting with the representatives of Clark and Newber last week. Councilmember Mayhew joined us at that meeting, and we anticipate within a month that they'll be concluding the first phase of the project, making some recommendations for identifying areas where we can improve and recommendations for how to make those improvements. So, unless there's any other questions on that one, we'll move on to other items. We got two other items here on the agenda. City issued cell phones for elected officials. I'm trying to tick off kind of the ones we can maybe move along quickly on. I think the one on council committees will take a little longer. So let's take up that one first. City issued cell phones for elected officials. I'm not sure who wants to queue up this conversation. Bob, do you want to take that one?
Happy to. We did discuss this at F&A. As council's probably aware, there's been a big, sharp uptick in the number and complexity of public records requests that the city has received since the close of the last year. At least one of those has included a request for text messages sent to or received by council members. And unlike city staff, council members are not currently provided city-issued phones, so we don't have a ready way technologically to retrieve council text messages related to city business, and so it makes responding to the request more cumbersome and involves asking council members to search their personally owned devices for communications that may have related to city business on which texts were sent. And so one way to address this is for council to be issued and carry a city phone and to use that for telephonic or text message communication. I did just review today, the Attorney General Ferguson has issued revised model rules related to responding to public records, and they do now include a section addressing this issue, and it does contain some language indicating that is one way for cities to address use of personal electronic devices by elected officials is to issue city-owned electronic devices that then can be retrieved when a request is received, and that can be have the documents taken off that way. So there was a fairly robust discussion at F&A. Some committee members are not interested in carrying two devices, and I think a perspective, or even three, and a perspective that doing so might not in the end save any time, because you might still have to search your personal device and provide an affidavit that there aren't city-related records on it. So the matter, I think, was asked to be brought to committee of the whole without a recommendation from F&A, but we did want to make a decision one way or the other so that either we issue 7 council phones or we don't issue any. I think I've summarized the committee's view on that.
Well, so you really
Councilmember Sunwall and then Councilmember Holloway.
So, as much as I loathe carrying a second device, this is tied to my personal life, to my business life. I actually don't think the company that I represent would be thrilled that I would be receiving texts back and forth that might be related to city business that could then be searched. I don't know how other people's businesses feel about that, but I don't want to carry a second device, but I also can't I can't have, this has to be kind of my own thing, my kind of sacred device. It's separate. I also don't need to carry a city device home with me at night necessarily, right? I can leave it at my office and where it will be during waking hours where I could be reached. So I don't know that's as much of a burden as maybe I think it might be, but the whole exercise of having to turn this in or search for it ad nauseum when any citizen or non-citizen wants to make a public request about what might be on my phone related to city business, to me is, we've only scratched the tip of the ice, scratched the surface. There we go. Metaphors mixed up. Scratch the surface on that. So I would reluctantly be in favor of that, and I feel like that might be the most feasible and responsible way to handle such information exchange.
Realize the one caveat you always hit the track is it can suddenly flip back to where you have to make sure to get off that city device and back on a personal device when it comes to anything that might have a hint of politics attached to it, you know, or a campaign, any kind of campaign activities, because you're not allowed to.
We got a couple of years to figure that out.
True, yeah. Can't use city resources for those purposes. Councilmember Holloway and then Councilmember Shepherd.
No, so 2 points. Bob, it's really 7 phones or no phones. You're asking for that sense of direction from the council.
Correct.
Okay, that's 1. 2, my advice to you is really to separate your business from your personal life. I already carry 2 phones. You're asking me to carry a 3rd phone. I'm not going to do it. If you want my personal phone and enjoy corny Holloway family humor, go for it. I can give it to you while you go search through the jokes, okay? But I can tell you right now, I'm not going to carry a 3rd device.
Councilmember Shepherd.
I had asked about, I looked at other cities to see what they were doing, and they have city phone numbers. They don't, it doesn't appear that they have actually mobile phones.
Peggy, would you speak into the mic more?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
So I looked at other cities to see what they were doing, and it appears that they are using city phone numbers, but not mobile phones. I'm assuming that based on they have the same six first digits, and then they have the last 4 digits. And I know that Jim had talked about, you liked having Jody answer the phone for you, but I think that's kind of a waste of a resource as far as time of personally answering your phone. I don't know how many calls you get. Maybe you don't get that many, so it doesn't matter. But I think if you have somebody who wants to leave you a message and they want you to be the person to hear it, and the city wants to have a record of what's going back and forth between who, I think that might be an idea of how to deal with that. But I was asking about the cost because we heard $5,000 for all of us to have cell phones.
It's way lower than that. I mean,
It's
these
less
days
than that?
with the packages we get with Verizon or whatever, it's maybe $40 a
$40 per month.
PJ if you want to.
$1,000.
So we sent council about 3-4 months ago about the possible cost, and I think it was $4,200 if we can get that lower, but we're basing on an estimate of about $50 per phone per month.
Okay.
That would be the annual cost, is $4,200.
And I also know
taxes. I'm sorry, go ahead, Councilmember Shepherd.
I also know that you can take, you can do texting from your email. I do that pretty often. So I think that, if we wanted to put a link into something saying if you want to text this person, you can just have them go to that email address, and they can put that email address into their phone, and they can text you.
Councilmember Mayhew.
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Warren, for being willing to answer my phone. Just so that we're clear, she volunteered that. I did not request it. and she has received, since we published that phone number, exactly 0 phone calls to me through that phone number. The thing I would just point out is that if the request that came in was to retrieve text messages or to provide text messages related to city business, giving me a phone will change nothing. You will still have to ask me about my other phone and whether I received any text messages on it. And it turns out you may find a couple. Every time I get one, I forward it to my city email address to create a record. So the reason that you will find that, and the reason I'll predict that all of us will find that, is people who know us in the city. We live in the city, we have friends here. They know our phone numbers and they send us texts, and they're not going to know that they need to use a different number to text us a question about the city. It's just, so I don't, we're trying to solve a problem in a way that isn't going to solve the problem. And I really do worry about what the mayor just raised. What happens when I get a text that isn't city business? What happens if I run for re-election and the text I get has to do with that election, which I'm pretty sure is I'm not permitted to use city resources for? So it just seems fraught, and it doesn't seem to solve the problem to me, and I don't want to carry 2 phones, so I'm against it. And I think this could be perceived by members of the public as a perk, and I definitely don't want to have to answer questions about why it is that the city is paying for me to have a cell phone when all of the rest of the citizens of the city don't get one. So I know that that could be sort of a sarcastic question, but it nevertheless might get asked, and I don't want to have to answer it.
Councilmember Stonewall?
Yeah, I'm fine with just using my phone. So I withdraw my undesire to have a third phone, and mostly because I just can't imagine the weight that Brian would have to bear to carrying a third phone. I have to drive a 747 to get it here.
Physical limitation. It was a behavior limitation.
So I actually, the points I've heard so far, I think that probably outweighs my concerns. So I think we ultimately will have to get asked on our phones about our personal phones anyway. And I know Anna's going to call my cell phone anyway. So, so I withdraw my reservations about keeping the status quo.
Before anyone feels too sorry about Councilmember Holloway, just keep in mind he was mowing his lawn with an iPad hanging from his belt along with his phone.
No, that was an Android device. Don't, no, wait a minute, no.
This
Don't
past
put an
weekend,
Apple device on my hip, no.
He's got more engineering protractors and pens and things hanging out of his pockets all the time. And so, anyway, any other comments, Councilmember Jeans, for us? Let's say we haven't heard from you guys.
For me, I can go either way. But I'm wondering from the city clerk standpoint, would it be easier to get a hold of council members using this city cell phone?
I know how to get a hold of every single one of you at any time.
Okay.
I want to give Councilmember Jeans an opportunity first.
So maybe an IT person would be best to answer this for me. I have no text messages on city business, but if I get one, if somebody leaves a text message on my phone and it is city business, can I say to that person, would you please send me an email that covers this exact same matter so that there is a record of it, and then for me to erase the text message? Is that legal, and is that?
TJ.
So I will leave the legalities to our attorney, but what I will tell you is if we get asked for a specific record and the record is residing on your phone and it gets deleted and someone else is able to produce it and we're not, we are liable for it. So.
Is there a way, PJ, that can be forwarded to an email at the city or some other way so that then there will be a related record in city possession?
So there's always a way to do those things. The challenge is the original record. What's in your email is a copy of a record. So if if someone decides to request underlying data about the text message, for example.
Or the metadata.
Yes, it will not be available, and we cannot produce that. And
the
that's the buzzword right now.
The metadata is the data that kind of shows where it originated, how it routed through the internet.
Yes,
That sort of thing.
so the metadata is the data about the data. So, those are the challenges.
So the Attorney General model rules do have suggestions that include, if you receive things on your home or personal handheld device, keeping them in separate folders and then forwarding them routinely to the city. As PJ said, then we will only have a copy, we won't have the original, but we don't always get requests for metadata. So that would, you know, I guess potentially spare us requesting personal devices unless we got metadata requests. And then we might need to get devices so that that information could be obtained. As far as the can you delete it question, it depends on what the content of the message is, because our retention schedules differ depending on whether information is transitory. Can you meet for lunch tomorrow at 1:30 to talk about item X is going to be a more transitory message that can be, once the information's put on your calendar or what have you, can be destroyed, as opposed to something that's more substantive in nature that may be subject to a different portion of the retention schedule. So it's hard to answer that question in the abstract.
Councilmember Mayhew, then Councilmember Shepherd.
I just wanted to make a comment for the public that if you want to reach a council member, including me, if you call Jody, that's your fastest way to get an answer. Trust me, when Jody calls, I answer and I do what she tells me, and I know that all the other council members do as well.
You're all very good, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Councilmember Shepherd.
So I would like to have a city phone number. How do we do that?
Well, it's a...
So the question I have is, we can have a voice mailbox for the council, for each of you here in the city. That can happen. There is a cost to it still, because those are still licensed. We have this beautiful product from Cisco that charges us for every individual that is part of the system.
Is that charge comparable to a cell phone?
I don't know. I think it's probably less, but we did not investigate the cost of that.
Okay.
So typically when we add a device to our phone system, we buy a phone, and that typically comes with the license. In this case, there's no phone attached to it, so we would have to purchase the license. We have not figured out what that cost is, but we can certainly find out.
Yeah, it's been in my experience. I didn't investigate it thoroughly, but I know trying to contact council members in other communities, sometimes it's been the same number, for every council member, and it's routed to someone like Jody. The public doesn't necessarily know it's a different or the same number. They think maybe it's a proprietary number for that council member. Councilmember Sunwell.
I know we like to compare to Issaquah. So Issaquah's council members all have individual private cell phone numbers listed on the website. And I know they're private because a couple of them are out-of-state area codes. So they've figured it out, like they have on a lot of things.
With their private cell phones.
It
Correct.
must be their private cell phones. If it's that old.
I just want to get in the practice of making sure before I put additional tasks for the staff to research. Is there a majority of the council that's interested in doing what Councilmember Shepherd has suggested, exploring the idea of individual phone numbers on landlines or a virtual landline within the city itself?
Can I just ask just to clarify what you're trying to get at? The phone number that's listed on the website for me, which I believe is answered by Jody, does that have a voicemail box associated with it?
Me.
Right. So the thing that we were just hearing about, there's no cost to a voicemail. It just gets fielded by...
Well, except that it might be just her voice, not...
Separate box.
Hello, you've reached Councilmember Mayhew.
Well, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
And it could probably forward something to let me know that something came in.
Oh, Jody will let you know, don't worry.
She's
But no,
available.
that's what I'm asking is, does it, if you're not there, does it go into a voicemail box, do you know? Or is it just going to your voicemail box?
It goes to my voicemail, and I do have backup staff to check my voicemail daily.
Right, so there wouldn't be an additional cost then, right, PJ?
I just want to make sure I understood correctly. Councilmember Shepherd is asking for individual phone numbers. If I misunderstood that, I apologize. But the voicemail box for Jody obviously already has a license for it. But if we were to add individual voicemail boxes for each of the council members, there will be a cost.
Here's the web page. There's a phone number right here, 425-888-8016.
And it's shared by 5 other, yeah. it's
That,
the same
that's
as Jody's
Jody's voicemail box.
Okay, so I guess that clarifies the question. We're not asking for individual phone numbers. We're asking for that phone number, which she would then handle.
I'm assuming that's what's happening right now. And again, if I'm misunderstanding, what I understood from Councilmember Shepherd is that each of the council members would have an individual phone number. Is that incorrect?
Well, I was really kind of asking for myself, not for
Gotcha.
everybody else.
So I'm assuming based off of that, which would mean 8016 would not be Councilmember Shepherd's voicemail box. It will be something else. It'll be another number.
Are you sure she wouldn't be willing to have 8016 as long as Jody got a hold of her promptly? I think she might. I don't know.
Because it sounds like if you had a phone number, it's always going to go to voicemail, right?
How would it be accessed by the council? How would it be accessed by the council if they did have their own extension?
They would have to dial in to the system. It's similar to if you have your cell phone and you forgot it, you dial your phone number and you can actually access your voicemail box. It would be very typical to that.
Can they forward?
Point of order. Yeah. Wasn't the question tonight cell phones or no cell phones? Some of these mechanics can be, should be worked out.
Yeah.
When you can sit down and have a discussion about requirements and everything else, which is a little deeper than we usually get into conversations here. So, point of order, wasn't the question tonight cell phones or no cell phones?
Yes, point is well taken, so we'll return to the original
We can get
conversation.
a dinosaur too.
Councilman Lissay?
I've appreciated just kind of sitting and listening to all of the conversation. Whether I have a cell phone for the city or not, I may not respond with that cell phone. I may not have it with me. The public doesn't know which phone I'm using or where they're going to contact me. I myself, I don't think I've had a single text message to my phone since being elected. If I get a phone call to another number and I call them back, I'm going to use whatever phone I have in my hand to call them back. I think the conversation's kind of irrelevant because if there's a public records request, they're going to ask for whatever records are available, and it's not going to matter whether we have a cell phone issued by the city or not. So originally I was for having a separate number, but I don't see how that's going to change the situation with public records request. I'm happy to either provide an affidavit or save messages or whatever happens to come to my phone. I just need a procedure how to do that. Because most phone, at least my phone, I don't know if anybody else's phone, it only saves 30 days worth of text messages anyway.
All right.
So
for the sake of time, council, tonight, I'm already counting that a majority, if not a strong majority of the council is not leaning in favor of cell phones, so.
That's correct.
I think we're ready to probably wrap it up and put a bow on this particular conversation.
Yeah.
Joint meetings.
Good. Happy to move on.
If you want the info, just ask for it.
Councilmember Jeans, any last comments?
Happy to give it.
A comment. In reading the Seattle Times today about the frustration that Pierce County has, that they spent over $1 million in legal fees over the course of 6 years regarding public records requests of text messages. And my conclusion, and perhaps their conclusion, but at least my conclusion is, no matter what we do, it's not going to give any finality to the question of, are we protecting ourselves better? Are we properly giving public records out properly? So giving cell phones to everybody is not the answer. It's just another question as to whether that's the right thing or not. And I'd like more discussion about what the problem is and what the possible solution is, but I'm afraid that the legislature is not clear on that, the courts are not clear on that, and I'm not ready to make a decision about whether I want a cell phone, because it's probably not going to take the anxiety and the cost away from some protracted requests for records.
All right, thank you, Bob. And again, I'm seeing a pretty strong majority of the council saying they're not interested at this time in pursuing that, so it doesn't preclude the council from raising it again in several months from now or another year from now if issues do come up that seem to exasperate that. And again, for the sake of night, I'm just going to say, let's, because I'm determined to get us out of here before 10 o'clock. We have one more item to discuss. Councilmember Shepherd, I would suggest that if you want to bring that other item forward about separate phone lines forward, and maybe discuss it at committee as well. That'd be good.
Safety committee.
Somehow it's just introduce it as a safety item, right? Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure how that resolves capturing text messages with landlines at City Hall.
Chief will let her have her own voicemail.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, so not to muddy the water, but there are other things such as Google Voice, in which I have it on here.
You can assign
a
separate phone number, yeah.
Records all that stuff up in the cloud and everything else, so take a look.
Yeah, no, I set that up when I went to Korea, so I had that same thing. It was some Maryland number. It randomly assigns you a number, so.
That may be why Issaquah
Of course, the staff never could figure out who was calling when I tried to call on it. All right. Okay, so let's move on, if we could, to the last item. And again, I'm going to urge you to accept full responsibility if you push this past 10 o'clock. But we have the council committee of the whole joint meeting conversation to still continue. If you want, Mayor Pro Tem, I'll turn that one over to you.
You've thrown it right back at me.
Oh, we do have an executive session, remember, too, so.
Oh, well, no, that one's yours.
All right. That means you have about 20 minutes.
All right, so due to some sick leave and some inordinate amount of time spent on information requests, we do not have an agenda bill laying out expanded attendance at committees and everything else. I do have commitment, I believe, that we'll work that in the preceding weeks from here, but I don't have it here yet. So I would like to extend one more week, having our committees as joint committee and committee of the whole, with the understanding that non-public works, F&A, whatever, attending council members are there as extension of public.
I second that.
Okay, motion and a second to extend the, all the protocols that were approved last time to notice committee meetings to make sure that all council members can attend as committee of the whole members. As stated by Councilmember Holloway.
Are we extending for 1 week again, or are we going to extend for
1 week?
1 week, okay.
If we need to do it another week, do it another week, but I don't want to.
We're not going to be here.
We should do it till the next city council meeting.
Till the next city council.
Through 1 week.
Okay.
Cycle.
Do it
I'm sorry, did you?
one at a time. We'll do it one way at a time.
Jody's trying to capture this language, so did you modify it to say for 2 weeks or until the next council meeting? Or
It's
just
the same thing.
Okay.
The next set of
Basically through
council
the next
meetings.
committee.
Yeah.
meetings,
The
okay.
next cycle of meetings.
Right.
Direction on what they want me to put in an agenda bill, the resolution as council rules and procedures.
Can you say it on the microphone, please, so I don't have to repeat it?
We'll go ahead and make this.
All right. Any further discussion, council? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Jody, did you want to?
If I'm going to prepare an agenda bill, a resolution does go along with it, amending the council rules of procedure. I need to know what the council would like in the rules of procedure. I need some direction on that, so perhaps.
So I've made the offer, and I will continue the offer. If there's some time I and Bob would like to sit down and work that out, I'm available.
Okay, to get it on the agenda, we will need to do that this week. Bob is on vacation, but I'd be happy to meet with you.
You meant Bob Sturbank?
Bob Sturbank.
Or Bob Sturbank? No, he'll be
He
here.
was on vacation the last cycle.
Yeah, so Bob and I could meet with you this week. And
I can be here all right, let's talk. I can be here tomorrow afternoon or Thursday.
Jody will reach out.
So we'll work schedule.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Any other items for committee of the whole? Keeping in mind the late hour. All right, with that, are there, all the reports are written at this time. However, are there any other questions or further questions or reports for or from the staff at this time?
Mr. Mayor, I have some questions on the staff reports. Is this the time to do that?
Yes, this is the time to do it, please.
Just a quick question on fire, Chief, if I can just ask you really quickly. I noticed that the data that comes out is from January. Is that common? Just have a kind of a lag in that information? So the February report has January data?
Yeah, we're required to turn them in before the end of the month, so the monthly total for the incidents follows a month behind.
Okay, that's it.
Okay.
For Parks and Public Works, Dan, I noticed that the report was exactly identical from January, except for there was an update in the Parks and Recreation Division on page 3, but every single other word in that document was exactly the same from January. Is there a possibility of getting an updated report that actually is for February?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Then communications. Couple questions. There's some words I weren't really sure about what they were about, and I would appreciate some clarification. And this is maybe some of these can be answered later if you need to just come up later. There was some referring to organic reach and the increase in organic reach. I'm not exactly sure what that is coming from.
I need to look that up.
Yeah, I figured you
Get
would.
back to you.
And the same, also there was an increase in impressions, and I'm not sure what impressions are in terms of communications.
I know, but I can't, I mean, I know when I write it, but I can't tell you right this minute.
Okay, and then the last thing would be, what's our status or at least expected anticipation of getting all past meeting minutes reports of the website?
Most agendas and minutes are on the website.
And from past, so migration from the previous website, because the previous website
Everything from the previous website came over.
it had some missing information from the past. It's been difficult for some folks to find that information.
Everything that was on the website before is on the website now.
I think one of the issues, Joan, when it was transferred to some of it was sort of
Yes, Civic
arranged by
Plus
alphabet rather than chronology, and so you're going back trying to clean up and make it easier to find.
So everything for 2018 has a naming convention,
Mhm.
so it's easy to find. All the other ones are there. They're in the right folders, and they're all dated, but some might have the date before, the date after, you know, it might say January 2nd, 2018, so-and-so agenda. That would be in 2017. And the other one might have the committee name before and the date after, so I have to go in and clean all those names
So
up.
some glitches and quirks in the transfer of information from the old to the new website. That's-
So then the only follow-up on that is there a timeline at which?
As time allows.
As time allows?
Mhm.
Okay.
I'm going back, we're going backwards, you know, 2017, then 2016. They're not, it's not that hard to find.
Understandable. But it's a frustration, and that's really, well, I guess I was just trying to clarify what that timeline is and where that's at. Then the last question is on the clerk report. There's been a number of conversations about public requests that could be handled by information being on the website. Is there an estimation of, is this because of the migration of the website? Is there a lack of information that some of these public requests are just asking for things that should be there, that could be easier?
A lot of the documents that are being requested are things that would not normally be on the website, such as 200,000 emails.
Or documents that have been archived.
Or documents that have been archive.
According to state procedures.
So
Things
really,
that would not typically be on the website.
Things that require legally redaction to protect private or employee information, others too.
so in the vast, so it's not a matter of just saying, I can't find meeting minutes, or I can't find this,
Those are
this
available.
agenda bill, I can't find this on the website, it's other issues outside of that.
Correct.
Okay, that's it, that's all I have.
And I, just for your information, I have put in for a grant. I should know in the next week or so if it's awarded, but to have up to 250 boxes that we currently have in archives, searchable, scanned, so that we can upload them. So cross your fingers.
Thank you, that's all I had.
Councilmember Mayhew?
I just have a follow-up question for the communications. Joan's still here. So it's, what's that?
No, go ahead.
It's my understanding that as you've got sort of a list of things related to the website that may be things that problems that arose in data coming over, so things like naming conventions that you want to address, things like data that may be missing that you've become aware of that's going to take some work to go back, try and find and put on. There's, as I understand it, a list of enhancements, things you want to do on the website that are not there yet, but you now have capability to do that, and probably a whole bunch of other things that I don't know about, but you've actually got sort of a long list of things that you're hoping to do with the website, and it's just going to be a matter of time and resources, and that, but it adds up. It doesn't add up to a few days worth of work. It adds up to a whole bunch of work, doesn't it? Is that
It adds up to
correct?
all the time that I have. That's what it adds up to.
So as we make
and then
these,
some.
sorry.
I would say, and then some.
Well, that's what I'm trying to get at. Isn't it quite a bit? And to take the whole wish list would be a whole bunch of and then some. Isn't that
Right.
Isn't
So,
that right?
so thank you, Councilmember Mayhew, for raising the issue. The difficulty for the current council coming in relatively new and trying with good diligence and integrity, trying to come up to speed and make good decisions that you're confident on, and not wanting to rubber stamp. And I applaud those instincts and that commitment. The difficulty is that there's just a lot of fire hoses to drink from to get there. And the staff has to still operate of what's the last set of council goals and priorities that were set. And as Councilmember Jeans and Holloway are familiar with, you know, there were conversations during over a year ago or 2 years ago on, you know, our ambitions to get to where we were improving and raising the bar on information available to the public. An improved website, we knew that was overdue for a refresh. And so, and there's, like anything else, there's a prioritization process that this council hasn't had the benefit to go through. When you have limited resources, short of just increasing taxes and doubling staff time, with limited resources, you have to prioritize what things can we get done. So it's not that Joan's trying to be dismissive of, say, a request to go back and clean up the glitches and make sure the chronological stuff on the minutes and the agenda's there. If the information's there, it might be a little more difficult to find. But if a greater priority was set on trying to make larger initiatives clearer to the public, where our estimation, our experience tells us you're going to have 100 eyeballs looking at this issue over here versus maybe 5 that are interested in the piece of information over there. We're going to prioritize the one that we think has the maximum benefit to the residents out there, and that's typically what the council's done in the past. So, and so that's what Joan's not trying to be flip or dismissive when she says when time allows. It's more of when time and priority allows, because we're going to get to those high priority items first and work our way down through that list.
Other things on the website that are also frustratingly not getting finished are great stuff from the departments. There's all kinds of stuff for fire that's not on there yet. Public Works, there's stuff missing that I want to get to. You know, and then the whole tourism aspect of it is pretty, right now, it's okay. It could be so much better.
So, Mayor, I think what you just outlined is absolutely my impression of the communications department, but other departments as well. And my observation is we have some really fantastic employees, and they tend to do what you said, prioritize and make smart decisions and just work through it. And I don't know if they just don't want to be perceived as unresponsive or perceived as whiners, but I think there's actually quite a backload in some cases, and I think that it would be helpful, certainly to the council, but I think to the public, to understand to some degree where we stand, so that there's a better sense of, well, you know, we're pretty up to date in these departments, but these departments have some backlog. I've heard some comments about some departments are getting impacted by public records requests, and so if there was a way to share this information, I know it sounds like another task on top of all the other tasks they can't get to, but maybe some at least high-level information about kind of the burden or what kind of burden our resources, our staff are under. Sharing that, I think, might help citizens and the council to kind of understand where we're at, and in some places there may be some discussion about additional resources as a result.
Yeah, no, I think that would be well received in general. I mean, I know Joan or Gail could probably easily and quickly prepare a PowerPoint if to come at a council meeting or in a, I know it's a little extra burden there, but you'd probably welcome the opportunity to clarify for the council just what, you know, how much's on your plate. List, here's the 15, 20 initiatives or processes underway and kind of a status of where those are. And, you know, and how many hours in a day you have and where those hours are being allocated. Now, IT does a pretty good job of breaking down that matrix because they've got to negotiate that not just with the council but with all the staff. Everybody's trying to grab their time, so they've got a very detailed matrix of all the projects in play, what percentage of completion or progress are each of those projects and how they're prioritized, and then work with the rest of the department heads to prioritize that. So we do a lot of those internal discussions with the communications department, do those prioritizations, but again, you guys have had so much on your plate trying to come up to speed on everything across the spectrum that it's a question of when do we work this one into that conversation to brief you fully on everything that's been going on in that communications department. This is the first time we sort of raised that issue. Does the council want to be fully briefed on that? So there's been, again, a lot on the council's plate as well. So we're trying to be mindful of prioritizing what to press on you guys' plate as well. Councilmember Shepherd?
My impression is that they're making really good progress on the new website, and I just see it constantly improving. So I have no qualms about the progress, and I know it's not going to happen tomorrow. It's going to take a long time. It's probably going to take a couple of years before we really get some of the things we'd really like to see. I think that people massively underestimate how long it takes to really bring a website online. And I'm just really happy with we're making the progress that you've made.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd say I want you to know that as with all of my colleagues, I set a really high bar for myself, and I have great concern for quality and quantity of work that I get done. So anything you have to request of me, I welcome, and I'll do what I can with it. I also want to thank you for reading my staff report. I do put time into that, and I'm willing to put in anything more information that you'd like. I'm not sure everybody reads everybody's staff report, so I think that's nice.
So in your staff report, you have upcoming projects, and I see some things that look like, I guess, some brochures that are going to be sent over to Pike's Market. And I'm just curious, does that feature all of the businesses here in Snoqualmie, or?
No, it doesn't feature the businesses. It's a real high level. You might go on a ferry and see something from Poulsbo or something from Leavenworth, and it doesn't have individual businesses. It's more, you know, the overall feel of our community.
So when we do brochures, do we generally feature all the businesses, or do just some of them get?
We don't feature any of the businesses.
Yeah, we can't do that. That's a really tricky, slippery slope to go down in terms of, we can promote the city and a lot of the assets here, but you can't get into the business of promoting businesses.
Okay.
And that's funded by LTAC.
Yeah.
Those brochures,
right? Because that gets into a gift of public funds when we're sort of giving to the benefit of different businesses, and if you miss one, they could get real messy real fast.
So there is an exception on that, and perhaps at this point we need to talk about it, but we do, you know, tout that we have 2 great golf courses, and we do name those. So I don't know if that will be a problem or not. I think golf is what do you call it? It's an asset for our community, especially since we're home of the Boeing Classic. But given that, you know, we don't highlight the other businesses, maybe we need to.
We can highlight districts like the downtown historic retail area or the Ridge Merchants area.
We do the districts, so. And that, we've been doing that for almost 10 years now. They go on the ferries, the airport, rental car agencies, visitor centers.
Thank you, Joe. Any other questions for or from the staff? Councilmember Shepherd?
So PJ, so I see that there's an ability to track public record requests, and it's like, looks like it's just barely started as far as the, I don't know, the work that you've got some kind of application or software. It's on your list of things to do.
Yes, so there is we've started a discussion. It would be internal tracking for now for us as we try to kind of grapple what, what resources are that's available. But it's essentially we've taken a look at what are the reporting requirements that the city needs to have, and we've kind of outlined those forms, and we're in the early building process of that particular portion of the project. We're implementing an IT service management software that we can do workflows and basically enhance the service delivery that way, so that when a new public records request comes in, staff would enter it in, whether that be the city clerk or TIA or RAINA, whoever that might be, depending on items that they select within that form would determine what tasks get assigned automatically, which we feel would be able to have a more like a single pane of glass view of how we're performing regarding a public records request.
So is this the self-serve kind of online form that you're talking about?
It's not. Okay. It is not. This is internal tracking for us so that we can for example, one public records might require an email search, might also require text message search, might also require some invoices search, all in one public records. Mm-hmm. So that's a big umbrella, multiple tasks, different work logs underneath it. So we're trying to itemize that and assign those to specific individuals and being able to track it internally that says, how's this invoice task research doing? How's this email research tasks doing? Be able to do that inside so we know we're meeting some of those guidelines or deadlines. Even just generation of a five-day letter, it's one of those things we just need a happy reminder that says, hey, you need to generate a 5-day letter, or when is that due, or our next milestone for this specific record is due. Just keeping things organized internally. At some point, there will be an external portion that we're looking at. We're just not quite there yet. So
I was going to say, on our website, don't we have an ability to do that that we maybe haven't got functioning yet, but it's something in the future that can be utilized?
Yeah, the website actually can take public records requests right now, correct?
If I can add something, legislation, and Bob Sturbank can help me with this. New legislation that took effect last year requires very specific reporting requirements to the Secretary of State's office annually. The capability of just taking in the request on the website doesn't even begin to meet those reporting requirements. They're actually quite extensive. So for every request we get, there's many things that we have to track. Total time spent, costs associated with that total time. There's a whole list. We do not have a program that currently does that. We're having to do that manually. So I just wanted to.
So the form we're building is to allow staff to be able to do those, to meet some of those records or reporting requirements that need to be. In IT, it's easy for us. It's a service level agreement. That's what we see. We need certain milestones that we need to meet, and we need to be able to report on those. So we track those items. So this is essentially what we're doing for them. So.
And I think we're going to cover this March 26th, correct?
Correct.
Right, so there'll be more discussion on it then.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, PJ.
Thank you.
All right, so council, if we're ready, I'm going to move on to citizens' comments at this time. Are there any citizens that want to speak prior to concluding the meeting? Monica?
Monica Lanny, P.O. Box 493, Snoqualmie. Okay, so we're talking about public record requests, and something that I think the city may not be aware of is the URL links were completely changed when the new website was rolled out. So what happened with a lot of citizens is they pulled certain documents, say they were gathering information from an environmental site, and referring to that quite often. Well, when the new website took effect, suddenly all of those links were erased and new links were issued. And I had a conversation with a friend of mine from Bellevue who's very involved in city and political issues, and another large city in our county tried doing this, and they were told it was not legal. So I think the city needs to take a little responsibility for the fact that how the new website was rolled out, they created a ton of new work for themselves because they changed all of the link addresses. They should have kept them consistent, and they did not do that. So I don't know if there's a way. I know Joan works very hard on this. She's a great employee. But those old links need to somehow be linked to the new link. So if somebody's looking up a specific document, they could find it. I know people that live in the city who have had to go back and spend hours finding documents that they've already researched, and many of them are not there. So I'm letting you know that the website is not perfect, and I know that the city is considering charging employees for city staff time. However, I believe the city has created a lot of this problem themselves, and they should give citizens maybe a 4 to 6 month window of no additional charges if they need documents that may not be available or the URLs were changed unnecessarily. Before they start charging citizens. I just don't think it's fair. And, well, I guess that's my 2 minutes.
All right, thank you, Monica. Anna?
I just want to clarify, is this regarding my comment about of the whole, or is this non-agenda item again?
I didn't specify, just go ahead.
Will there be a non-agenda item after this, or is this comment, is this it?
Citizens' comments. Just
Citizen
make
comment,
your
this
comment.
is it? Okay, thank you. So, Anna Sotelo, 7713 Center Boulevard, Southeast. Regarding the public records request, as someone that has been requesting them, I am struggling with a lot of times just finding a document on the website, and I feel really sorry for Joan, and I don't want to burden her, but I just keep hearing Mike, who did the quasi-judicial, saying hire someone. I've seen where you've hired people in the past for emergency contracts. If you could just maybe hire someone and get it done, it would really relieve them, make happier employees, and not have me doing so many requests that maybe didn't have to be done. Like, for example, I had printed out all the agendas for the Planning Commission for a certain year. Once I made a public record request, the first page of the agenda, now there's a whole packet with it. And again, it's not right. But I just want to go to what I really wanted to go back and talk about before this, about that income tax. That affects people like us. So that 30%, I pay the triple net for my building owner. So that I'm going to absorb that 30%. So how do I cover that now? Do I price it up in my menu food items, which is not good because, to be honest with you, volume beats raising your price, and that's the whole Red Robin theory, and that's kind of one of those formulas that I really want you guys to understand and see how those kind of things are going to affect us and how we absorb all those costs in our triple net. Going back to one last thing with PJ introducing that, the whole thing has just really left me confused and saddened because I feel like you guys didn't consider me a stakeholder. I'm seeing how Redmond reaches out during comprehensive planning to stakeholders if they haven't heard from them. And I see, like I said, so many planning commissions were so considerate to trying to come up with a system to engage stakeholders. And I just am curious who those stakeholders were
Anna,
for
thank
comp
you.
planning and how they were notified.
Thank you,
Who
Anna.
they were and how they were notified, because I never was in 12 years.
Thank you, Anna. Okay. Any announcements before concluding tonight's meeting? All right, with that, at this time, we're going to go into an executive session. During the regular meeting at 9:40 p.m. and call for an executive session pursuant to RCW 42.30.110, Section 1C regarding property acquisition. Bob Sturbank and Mark Hoffman are asked to remain. The executive session will last approximately 15 minutes, and there may be action following. Ask for Nicole.
Mr. Mayor, do we need to extend the meeting past 10 o'clock now?
No, not yet. It should be, we're going to be done in 15, we're going to be done in 15
Do it
minutes.
anytime.
Yeah.